Hey everyone, welcome to Paranormal Roundtable. I'm your host, Josh Turner, and thank you for being here on the Sunday. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you could be here today, that we could all be here today. How's everybody doing? It's been a very hectic few days for me, trying to get everything done so we can get these books out. Josh Turner at prtpodcast.com. Right here's the Patreon over here. Patreon.com/PRT podcast. If you you guys can, it's different tiers, $10, $20, $30, $40. Each one is a little better. The 10 and 20 are the same. My mind, I don't know what I'm forgetting or what I'm just, mind is somewhere else. I'm sorry, folks. I'm just not myself today. It's hard to be. Well, Scott didn't pass away today. He passed away on the 4th. No, actually, Britton Solomon wasn't the last one to pass away. Scott Martis passed away. Britton Solomon passed away. For me, anyway, these are people that were in the field. Kerry Arnold passed away. I wasn't real close with Kerry. I knew him. I knew of him, and I think we'd corresponded like once or something. Scott and me had corresponded a couple times. Had reached out to him after he was on a show. I believe it was called "The Truth Is Out There." Somebody just lambasted him. I reached out to him, and he didn't respond to me, and so I just kind of let him alone. I don't know what his feelings were at that time. I think he was pretty upset, and they kind of mocked him or whatever. And there were a lot of people who did. Funny because now I see people who were like, "Oh, rest in peace, Scott." When he was alive, they didn't like him. You know, I know exactly who you. I mean, I see it. I saw it. I was like, "Oh, okay. Don't drink that. The great value. Don't drink them." There's a recall stuff. Get rid of any of those recall of those. I don't know. Did you just buy those right now? But anyway, there's people that they don't like somebody, and then when they die, they jump on the bandwagon. Oh, rest in peace. I didn't know him that well, so I wasn't like posting all this, flowery words about him or whatever, because it just seems, disingenuous. We weren't like good friends or anything, I mean, like, I didn't dislike the guy. I didn't have anything ill to say about him, and it was just like, keep my mouth shut. I don't have an opinion. We should have, by all rights, been allies. Who is that now? But there are people who should be my ally now, and they choose not to be. So, can't make people be your friend. You can ask people to work with you and do whatever, but if they choose not to, that's really... It's just what it is. I'm not feeling really good today, folks. I got just...
We're all a little beat down right now.
Mm-hmm.
From the weather, from life.
Not the weather, dude. It's just...
Oh, I think that's what's hitting me.
Please pray for me, folks. Pray for Tony. I guess the weather's getting to him. I don't know, not to me. I just got too much going on. And the people you're supposed to be your friends and your allies and your whatever, you're the closest people, and then whatever. And I don't mean anybody like I work with professionally in this business, in this field, community, whatever they want to call it. not even talking about them. I'm just talking about you got to be a constant professional and keep yourself together. I get that, but sometimes things happen, and I should have been preparing for the show. Instead, I was dealing with other stuff, and work is a constant just pain, and it impedes a lot of what I want to do, and it's restricting. And give me a second, folks. I'll be right back, and we will do this correctly. All right. Give me 1 second. Please don't go anywhere. For this. Okay, so folks, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. I know we didn't get as many people. We lost people. Whatever. I'm dealing with some things. I'm doing the best I can. I'm sorry. I was not able to. Stuff here. I got some stuff written down, and I can't see. It's too dark here. Well, what about this one? Is that one supposed to be on? Give me 1 second, folks.
Temporarily, I can be.
Okay, so I'm going to let you take a vote, folks. We're going to tell stories today. That's all we're going to do. We're going to tell stories. That's what we do. And that's what we're going to do tonight. We have an episode coming up. We recorded it. What's it going to be on Tuesday?
So this Tuesday's episode, we went into some accounts of vampires.
So we did vampires, just vampires.
It's gonna be a really fun one.
So I'm here tonight. One of the things that bothers me is a lot of people who listen to me on Spotify and SoundCloud and all them other 15 different platforms, they don't come to the live streams. And I don't like, some of the stories I tell on here, I want to be able to tell on the podcast because it reaches a wider audience. But unfortunately, these people won't come to YouTube for whatever reason. And sometimes people from YouTube don't want to go and whatever. So it's like there's this back and forth. Typically, if you're here and you're listening on YouTube, then you will get the podcasts and the whatever. But the wider audience is the podcast because you get YouTube plus all these other platforms. So we have to kind of balance it out and weigh the balance between which stories are told, because we want to tell stories, but we want them to be on the widest audience possible. So we haven't figured out how we're going to do that. It's a work in progress, and I don't know what we're going to do. It's herding cats. It's trying to get people to do what you want them to do, which is almost impossible. And I mean, people are notorious about making bad decisions. It just seems to happen. I deal with it literally every day. I got a client right now that's driving me up the wall making bad decisions. And it's, can't even tell you how aggravating it is. I mean, you could tell somebody do this exactly, and they're going to do what they want to do, and then complain later, because that's just how people are. What was that? Y'all didn't hear that?
No.
Or what? I don't know. I heard like a boom, something. Oh. Well, people, let the chat fill up a little bit, because we have it set to where you can't rewind, right?
Yeah.
Explain that, Anthony.
Well,
Much people complaining.
yeah. I mean, I made it that way because it became a problem very quickly that, like, we would talk about something, and then 20 minutes later, a bunch of people who were watching the live stream from 20 minutes ago, they're not watching it live. They'll start like commenting on something that we already addressed, that we already talked about, and it's distracting to us, but it's also distracting to the chat, because they're trying to figure out like what it is that you're saying, what you're talking about, and with like texting and live chat, it's easy to misconstrue like what somebody is saying or what somebody means. So you add that on top of the fact that you're making comments about stuff that's out of context, and it I don't know, it opens people up to too many distractions, to too many disagreements. So it's just best if we're all on the same page, watching the live stream all at the same time. I mean, it gets too distracting both to us and to you who are watching, who are in the live chat, who are always here with us. And then you have to answer someone's question that was already answered 20 minutes ago. It's just, I don't know. It's best if we're all watching the same thing at the same time, and on the same page. It's best that we all understand like where we're at, what we're talking about. We're talking about the same thing. And but people don't always know that they're actually watching the live stream behind. That they might think that they're watching it live and they're 5-10 minutes behind, and they don't even realize it because it's kind of tricky. Like you have to make sure that you're watching it live, and some people don't know how to do that. So, I mean, it's for our benefit. It's for your benefit. And if you want to be able to fast forward and rewind, you can always do that after the live stream is done and it's processed and up on YouTube. You can do all the fast forwarding and rewinding you want.
Yep. So that's that. Thank you, Sugar Bitches, for pointing that out. We're pushing towards 30,000 people now on YouTube alone. So I'm going to let you guys vote. We got some different stories. We have a Skinwalker story. We have Bigfoot, which is kind of it's. I think it's kind of scary. It's a scary Bigfoot story. A lot of people are like, oh, Bigfoot, because there's been so much of it. Whatever. Do people talk about it all the time? Always got a lot of ghost stories. Got a couple weird ones. I got like a merman. I think two. Actually, mer creature stories, but I don't know if I'm gonna save those for like another show about that or not. I'm gonna put something together. Got another alien abduction. Got a lot of those going on. It seems like ever since we've been talking about it, whatever we talk about, it seems like that's what comes to us.
Oh yeah,
is that not correct?
Yeah.
I mean, somebody asked me the other day if we have anything about mummies, and at first I said no. But then I went back into the archives and I did find one. It was weird, and actually I'll start with this one, and it's not even listed in the heading, and it's the only one I found. But it was weird. It was somebody whose father was an archaeologist back in the '60s, and she is from. I can look up the name of the town. Well, it doesn't matter. It's not important. She lives in not Chile,
Argentina.
Not Argentina. It's right next door to it.
Uruguay, Paraguay.
Let me look it up. Any other time we'd probably. It's just
Is it naming South American countries?
Yeah, when you. I don't want to sit here. I gotta find out exactly where it
We got,
is.
I don't know, Colombia, Bolivia,
Peru.
Guyana, Peru.
Peru and Chile. I always get those two mixed up. Her father, though, worked as. This isn't a real long one, but I thought it was creepy and that was kind of interesting. But anyway, her name is Marisol, and she sent me this story, and I was reading. I was actually reading it last Sunday, like right after the show, and then she's like, "I have a story," and I was just looking through there, and I saw. So I have a story about my father was an archaeologist when he was working in the Andes. I thought it was very interesting, but I'm not gonna lie to you, I didn't read it. Like I just, I was just like, oh, cool, I'll get to that because I have a million things to do and a lot of different stories to get to. So one of the things that I when somebody mentioned about mummies, like you've talked about mer creatures, you've talked about werewolves, you've talked about vampires, you've talked about all these different things. Do you have anything about mummies or curses? And I was like, just kind of on a whim, Friday night, I went home and I just was looking through and I said, you know what? I do have one that I've found. Now I know all the stories about King Tut, and all the curses, that have been with these mummies, the Egyptian, but these were mummies that were found in the Andes.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have time to just go in depth because she did send me a pretty deep whatever, and maybe I can get into a deeper version of it on the podcast episodes. But one of the things that I thought was interesting, what I read, because I just kind of, like I said, I just kind of read over it. And so I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I've got every single detail because it was long in depth. There was a lot of things that happened, but her dad ended up for years being plagued with dreams and nightmares. And one in particular was a female. When these mummies were found, from what I remember reading, was that they were found and they were sitting in a position like they had died sitting down.
Yeah.
But the cold and very dry climate of the upper Andes, which is one of the most elevated places on Earth, because just the way it is like the high plains anyway, and then you got the mountains are up there,
Yeah.
and it's one of the highest plains. It's I think it actually is. There's a city. It's either in Chile or Peru. I can't remember exactly which one. You might even want to look it up. But I believe it is the highest elevated point on Earth where where there's habitation,
Mhm.
where people live.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine how thin the air is. But anyway, this very dry and arid climate lends to these mummies being able to
It preserves them.
preserves them very well. And one in particular was a female. And when they looked closer, it appeared that maybe she had been killed because it looked like something had cut her, like they had cut her. And so it was pretty freaky. Now we know that all of the Mesoamerican civilizations south of the equator, they pretty much did human sacrifice.
Yeah.
The Incans, somebody tried to argue with me one day. They're like, well, the Incans didn't do it. And I'm like, first they said the Mayans. I was like, what? I was like, the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Toltecs, Mixtecs, Zapotecs, every tech with the name, whatever, they committed some form
We're
of human
attacking
sacrifice.
each other.
They were attacking. and they said, well, the Incans didn't do it. So it was on a page, and I think it was about ancient civilizations and, or something like that. And I was like, that's not correct. And I tried to bite my tongue, but you know how it happens. It ends up bleeding, and I have to just let it out. So I was like, no, you are not right. And I said the Incans actually did, not on the scale that the Mayans and the Aztecs did, but yes, they did commit human sacrifice, and they did it in a very ceremonious way that was different. It was a little different than the way the Mayans just took them up to a temple, a ziggurat, which is a type of pyramid. They removed the heart, unaliving them, and then removing the head, and then tossed the body down. And the lower classes, there was a caste system there. They would collect the bodies and they would eat it. And I'm not joking. That's what they did.
Yeah.
Anybody says they didn't, they're full of crap. That's exactly what happened. And I'm telling you history. That's the truth. Bless you.
Yeah, I mean, like the priest class they probably wouldn't eat it, but that's because they wouldn't have to.
They wouldn't have to. They could eat whatever the heck is out there. But that is what they did. Now, the Incans, as far as I know, didn't eat each other, but they did commit human sacrifice, and they had their own gods. And so these mummies were found up in the Andes, and what ended up happening was they were preserved, but one of them. And they had like different types of spice and things that were stuffed into their bodies. So they said, oh, well, maybe the cut was made and then something was stuffed into it. And they said, no, it looks like a kill. Like they had used that to kill these people. And this was like back in the late 60s. And this probably didn't even make the press here in the United States because we live in this little bubble of crap. Excuse my language, but that's just, not language, but you know what I mean.
Bubble of curated information.
Bubble of bubbleless fisheye. Okay, so anyway, we live in this, filtered whatever. And so I was reading this story, and she said that her dad was plagued with nightmares, and one of them was of a female that was coming to his bedside, and when he would wake up, not only did he see it in his dreams, but he would wake up and she would literally be standing there, and her mouth was agape and with no eyes, and this thing, he began to become convinced that it was following him around. Like they would go to the market and he would see it. And slowly he began to kind of slip into madness, and she said it made him crazy, and he kind of went off the deep end. And one of the things that he did, because he was OCD, he's extremely OCD, he counted all the time with his fingers, like always, ended up having to go get checked out and ultimately checked into a facility. He became suicidal, and then eventually he just one day didn't wake up. And it was very tragic. And I think he died 73 or something like that. But she always accredited it to the work that he did up in the Andes with those mummies, and she thought that they were very. And now there was, according to the locals, a curse attached to anything. They were not to be disturbed. And they had sat up there for, I believe, from what I was told, if this is correct, from what I read, they had sat up there for like, I think 1,200 years, like a long time. I'm not talking about hundreds, like over a millennium.
Yeah.
But when they found them, and I think they actually took pictures of them, and you can find them, I think it might have been National Geographic or whatever. I have to go back and read what she said. Like I said, I'm just telling you off the cuff of what I remember reading, and I didn't try to commit it to memory. I was just going over it. And I can try to look into the information and try to get a broader, picture to you, a more detailed picture of what we're talking about here. But yeah, mummies. And it is weird. And we're talking about, mummies that were found in South America. They do believe that they were killed and then they were stuffed with like spices and some sort of like, whatever, incense was burned in front of them, and they were somebody's great grandfathers and grandmothers and whatever. But they were killed. They were all in their 20s when they were killed. And they were in relatively decent health. So they weren't picked like, oh, well, let's pick Fontaine because, well, let's be honest, she's old and her exit's coming up, so let's just use her. No, they picked young, virile people that were like in the prime of their life. No. So they believed it had to have been human sacrifice to whatever deity. They were like, we're going to give them the best. Very interesting, too, though, that she herself, this woman who sent me the message. Now, I did read over this part of it because it was toward the beginning of it. She was like, let me tell you a little bit about myself. And the beginning of it, the whole thing, it was about alien abduction because she was an abductee. Interesting that her dad was an archaeologist who also claimed to have been abducted. So if that has anything to do with the mummies, I don't know. It could be, or it could be a stretch, but the bottom line is there was something going on there that went far beyond just a spirit showing up at your bedside. There's a reason why that spirit looked like one of these mummies. There was another one that he would see too that was a man. And she said that he was always like wearing a little hat, which somebody had to have put that on the mummy's head when they found that it had to have been something that was put there after, like years later.
Yeah.
And they estimate that the hat itself is over 100 years old. So somebody had been there before, and anything of value had probably been looted. So it was a very weird thing. And when you look at the whole, I don't know how to describe it. Like, it just seems like, too many, to think it's a coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, now the abduction scenario that she went through, and I can tell you, we're not a long drawn out thing about that, but it did involve grays. It was just grays. And she believed that they had harvested something from her, and her dad was plagued with that. And I don't know. Now, I know if anybody's ever heard of the Peruvian skulls. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that. You know what those are?
The what?
Skulls, the Peruvian skulls, where they found that they had the elongated heads.
Yeah.
You've heard of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, that's another weird thing. This was not far from where they found some of those skulls. These were actual just human mummies with regular heads, but they were up in like a shallow cave, and it was way up in there. And of course, the government also has a lot to do with whether or not you can go and dig in an area, Caracawazo or whatever that place is in the middle of nowhere, Egypt. My friend, she's out there and they're digging, trying to uncover some things, and it's always a problem. Like, always. And I don't want to mention the guy's name. Starts with a Z. But anyway, there's always something, and he talks like this, and this is what happened, and the Egypt, we are the same people from the, like, yeah, right, whatever, shut up. I hate when he talks. I hate when he opens his mouth. I don't want to hear him talk. I'm just like, yeah, right, do whatever. Yeah, your grandparents, they were the dynastic Egyptians. They look just like you. Exactly. Completely. Ramses II, that was your uncle, right? Yeah. Full of crap, dude. Yeah, there you go. You said it, so I didn't have to say it. Can't stand that guy. But anyway, the whole point, I mean, he's a roadblock, you know. Well, he's no longer the head, yeah, but he's still there, and he still causes, that's like saying, oh, well, you know, Castro, he's not really in charge of Cuba anymore. Really? Because they're still communists. The guy from Venezuela, he's not there anymore. They're still, you know. So he's just going to be a problem for them, you know, until people like that are out of the way, you know, you can and figure out what's going on. And he tries to block anybody, which I don't totally blame him about this with the way people are, you know, but we're never going to get to the bottom of things if this guy, you know, if these kind of people like him, you know, these red tape people, you know, are going to stop, you know. It says, I read that cocoa leaves, which were grown only in South, were found in ancient Egyptian tombs. Yes. Yep. They're not only is it that, but they found like Chinese anchors that were very distinctly Chinese. Okay.
In
I'm
Egyptian
talking
tombs
from
too?
southeastern China, you know, which would be the Fujian province area, right? And they used a very specific type of round anchor, and they found them off the coast of Argentina. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's some weird stuff, dude. And then I believe there was something else I was going to say. In South America, what was it? There was something they found. And they tried to say that it was because they wanted it to be the Portuguese that were the first people had gotten there. It was in Brazil. Anyway, I don't know. I have all these things, notes and things I could tell you for hours, all this archaeological stuff that brings it all together. And then, of course, in Cahokia, you know, they found like Greek and Roman coins and things like that. And I mean, it's really weird. Like when you start going back and look at, you know, you can tell we had a common ancestor. And you can only imagine what happened, you know, in Antarctica, like why they cordoned it off and said, oh, nobody can come here, you know, just us, you know. Greenland. We were talking about Greenland with Kirk Reed on Friday. When you look at Greenland, which a lot of people believe is Thule, because it's called the farthest north, right? The reason I believe that there are inner earth beings all over Greenland is very simple. The middle of Greenland is just like a permafrost. It's just frozen tundra, and nobody lives there. It's like Australia. The middle is just nowhere land. And so nobody lives in the middle of it. Everybody lives on the outskirts, on the coastal towns of Greenland, and there's all of 12 people in the whole place. It's literally, I don't understand, because I think this is a Mandela effect too. I don't understand why they call India the subcontinent when you look at it and it's just a little bitty thing on the map, and Africa's like this big now and India's like that. And I'm like, wow. Because I remember, and now India is literally a third the size of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
That's unfathomable, because I remember, and maybe I'm completely off my gourd here, but I remember India being a huge country, like a huge country that was dwarfed the United States. And because I always remember South America, and then I remember the shape of Brazil kind of being like that, like and kind of coming down and looking like a little Africa. I remember that. And then I remember Africa not being nearly as big as it is now. It's like it takes up most of the map. And then I see India come down, and it's about halfway down, you know. And now India is like this little bitty spot right there, and it's completely overcrowded and overpopulated. No wonder they're all leaving, because it's teeny tiny now compared to, it's not even a third the size of America. The United States is not that big of a country, really, when you think about it land-wise. Thank you, Bradford, for that donation. Greatly appreciated and extremely needed, but not expected. But thank you for listening too, everybody that's here. So India is like, I looked on the map, and it keeps baffling me how like South America is way over here, which I remember America being like this and South America being like that. Now it's like way over here in like Africa, almost touching Africa. It's like the Atlantic Ocean is as big as, you know, our neighborhood swimming pool. It's crazy. I don't know what they did. That's why, you know, if they're able to do this, it tells you something about the nature of our reality. If they're able to go in and mess with maps and change names and places, and the Monopoly guy never had a monocle, and we could get into that all day long. Somebody was asking me face to face at the gym the other day, a listener, about the Mandela effect. Yes, I did a 2-part about it. And of course, I got a bunch of hate from it because, you know, I'm a piece of crap for doing it. I don't know why. But anyway, that India, you know, it's so small now compared to the way I remember it. And I have a very good memory. And I'm just like, how is that even possible? Like, but anyway, Greenland is like a continent of itself. I mean, it is like a continent. And the middle of it is completely frozen. Look how big it is. Go look at it on a map. It's always been big. I remember that. And if you look at it, most of it's uninhabited. 90% of it's like uninhabitable. So imagine what lives there. If the Icelanders are to be believed, the uninhabitable places in Iceland are where the elves live. And that's probably what's going on. The legend of Thule is Leif Erikson. You know, he went there, a Viking person, you know, and just long story short, he encountered giants, the remnants of giants, and they had been decimated by a war with normal-sized people and dwarves. There was like a three-tier war going on there between these three species, and ultimately, these dwarf creatures got the upper hand. Now, somebody would say, or somebody would think that, you know, how could it be that the little people win? Well, they take up less space, and there's a lot more of them. We lost in Vietnam. The average American is 25% bigger than the average Vietnamese person, but there's a lot more of them, and each one of them can hold a gun. Common sense is going to tell you that, hey, and you're on their land, which is really is what was going on there. These people were on their land.
Yeah.
The humans, I think, landed there or were seated there. I think the giants were the remnants of some escaped Anunnaki, Nephilim, whatever, and they were getting their butts handed to them by these little whatever. And they had a type of technology. And there's a whole lot of stories about this. This isn't just like one account. It's not like just Leif Erikson said, "Oh, there's a lot of them there." Oh, no. There's a lot of stories about Thule. Go and look it up. Thule. And you can just go into it, you know, any time you want. Take your time, go and read about it. It's very interesting, and give me your thoughts and opinions on that. But that's not why I'm here to talk about that. Today, we're going to talk about some other stuff, but let me know in the comments here what you want to hear. I have a very strange three water cryptid stories, but there is, Austin Berry, the Tartaria thing. I'm just going to be real honest with you. The Tartaria thing is completely it does sound kind of interesting. And if you don't know what that is, folks, I'm not going to get into a long dissertation here, but I don't believe in the Tartarian Empire the way that this mud flood, and this only happened in the 1800s, and somehow we didn't know about it. My grandfather, who was born in like 1922 or 20 or something like that, his grandfather was around, close that door. He was around years and years ago, like 1860s, whatever. Never told him anything about a mud flood. Never heard anything from any of these. I knew my grandfather's uncles. My great-grandfather died right before I was born. But I knew all of his brothers. I knew his uncles. And that was the generation before my grandfather. And I remember my Uncle SD talking about his grandfather, who was around during and before the Civil War. and how the world was. And there was no mention ever of there being a giant mud flood, okay? My honest opinion, mud flood is a modern make-believe creation. Somebody made that up, unfortunately, just to mess with people. And there are, unfortunately, people who believe it. Tartaria is how you pronounce it. Okay. Didn't know that, but whatever. It's really ridiculous. Like when you go and you look at this, I'm a student of history, and I can tell you right now, I just don't believe it. Not at all. Now, could it have happened in the 1800s when technology wasn't the way it is now, and the way that word didn't travel fast like it does now? Could it? Oh, you're just joking. Funny. Could it have happened locally? Like say that it happened just like here in this region, and word didn't travel to a very lightly inhabited area or something. Yeah, I mean that could have happened. Like maybe somewhere in Siberia or something where there's not a lot, and maybe it did. And it's weird that they call it the Tartarian Empire. Now, if you know anything about history, the Tartars were an actual people, and the Tartars were very violent, and they lived in southern Russia. Their main enemies were the Cossacks, and the Cossacks destroyed them. The Cossacks destroyed what was also left of the Khazaric Empire, and then they destroyed the Tartars. So if you go back and you look, and that's actually my dad's people, so if you go back and look at the Cossacks, they're very violent, warlike people who they weren't to be messed with. They just, they sacked Istanbul just to prove a point. They sailed across the Black Sea and they sacked it just to prove a point. Corley, is the Younger Dryas strike could make mud floods in certain parts of the country? I mean, yeah, but I mean, how come nobody's knows anything about this? Like all of a sudden now we're hearing about this, and there was never any talk of it ever until the last 10 years or whatever. Yeah, Siberian territory in Russia, it says Tartaria on old maps. Now, let me explain that to you, Rethinking. The Tartars were a people, but it also became known as like a brand, not a brand. What would you call it? Like in Egypt, the Hebrews were known as the Hebron. The Hebron, literally, all they were was just a loose confederation of people who came from the land of Canaan originally, and they came as, what do you call it? Immigrants, workers. But the name Hebron, it means like outsider, and there's different ways to translate it. It can be offensive. It really was kind of an offensive word that not only meant outsider, but it meant like troublemaker, outlaw, lawbreaker, infidel, And so that's what the Hebron were, and it got turned to Hebrew. But really, it was just a term for people who came from Canaan. They were Canaanites. And that's where the Hebrews came from. And so then they went back supposedly after the Exodus, whatever, depending on what you believe. Archaeologists will argue that never happened the way they say it did. And the Old Testament is suspect to a lot of different interpretations. Subject to a lot of different interpretations. And it's suspect too. I mean, because there's a lot that, and I don't care what anybody says, Jesus, he says some things that kind of refute some of the things in the Old Testament, not all of it. And then people get into this whole, he came to fulfill a promise and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, and there's all kinds of different ways to interpret that. And that's a whole another mudslide you can go down and end up in 1,000 different directions. But no matter which one you pick, you're going to offend somebody's sect of Christianity, Judaism or Islam, and then you're going to be on the hot seat with whoever, and there's going to be people, I'm not listening to you anymore because you said something that I didn't totally agree with. And they already did. See, 2 people just dropped off, 5 people, whatever, because they don't want to hear that. What I'm talking about is that the term Tartar became known as outlander, outsider. The territory known as Tartaria, that sounded funny. The territory known as Tartaria became kind of known as a no man's land. Like that was the land of the nomadic Tartars. So when you look at a map from those times, you might see on there, it'll say something like, barbarian, like an old map of Greece. Everything north of Macedonia was just called Barbaria. It's barbaric, whatever. Because they didn't know what was up there. They just knew that there were some bad wild tribes people. So the Russians, who were predominantly European, the land that they sort of controlled and possessed, which they did, but they kind of didn't, because they really didn't have control of it. They just thought this is all the Tartars' land, and down in the below that was the Cossacks' land. So they just said that that's what this is, and then off to this other region is Khazaria. Beyond that, we don't know. We know Persia's down there somewhere, and the other side there's China. So on a map, people took that and they said, "Oh, there was an entire empire of a bunch of people named Tartarians." And I actually heard a guy on a show the other day. I'm not going to call him out, Eric Club, but he says, "There's a Tartarians," and I thought, I want to slap this guy so hard that he goes back, like he literally goes reverse into time, back into his mother's womb.
Well, I want to meet one of these Tartarians and thank them for their tartar sauce.
I don't.
I like that Tartarian sauce.
I think it's the worst thing they left behind. Such stuff's gross.
Yeah, there you go. And Rethink Inc. says, yep. And people turn their vivid imaginations into Tartaria being some hidden high-tech civilization that was destroyed. That's rich. And folks, I am not a disinformation agent. I am very much on board with conspiracy because it's actually a lot of it is truth. I'm not going to get into a bunch of it here. But people say, oh, that's a conspiracy. That's a conspiracy. That's just what you say when you can't figure out what the heck is going on. But some of it does get down to the ridiculousness. It gets down to it borders on absolute stupidity. Let's use our common sense and let's be reasonable. And I try to do that. I sit up here and I talk about vampires, werewolves, alternate realities, space, demons, whatever. So I'm the last person that's going to regulate somebody and be like, oh, yeah, no, that's not real, whatever. Because I don't know. But I can tell you right now, when I don't believe in something, I'm going to tell you the absolute unadulterated truth. And I don't believe in the mud flood, and I don't believe in the Tartarian Empire. Because the Tartars didn't have an empire. The only barbarians that I can say really carved out an empire, the true barbarians was the Khans. Mm-hmm. From Genghis, and of course his name wasn't Genghis. Do you know what his real name was, Tony? Chenghis, because I knew you weren't going to tell me.
I was going to say Temujin.
Well, yeah. Temujin, but it's not even pronounced Genghis.
No, it's Chinggis. Yeah.
Chinggis. And of course, Temujin, which is, and do you know what tribe he came from?
No.
I did know, I learned it recently, but I forgot the name.
Okay. Thought you were a big fan of so you've been lying?
Genghis? No.
Yeah, I thought you.
I liked him, but I didn't really study him.
Well, what was his grandson's name? Do you remember that? Don't say it.
I mean, all I know from Genghis is when I watched Marco Polo.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, wasn't that one of the characters in that show? I didn't watch it, but I mean, was it not?
Yeah.
Kublai?
Yeah.
Kublai Khan, yeah. And then he even talks about what an underachiever his dad was, because his dad was nothing but a spoiled, drunk kid. And Genghis himself had a talk with him, and he told his grandson Kublai, he's like, you're going to have to carry on my legacy. He's like, most of my children, including your dad, are losers. I'm not joking.
Yeah.
You know, Temujin had a good friend, and they kind of conquered things together. But yeah, I mean, when you sit back and you read about this, they were the only real barbarians. Now, people can make the argument that Attila the Huns were an empire, but they didn't build an empire. I'll tell you why. Somebody tried to say, well, the Cossacks had an empire. I was like, no, they didn't. The Tartars didn't have one, neither did the Cossacks, and I don't care what anybody says, neither did the Huns. And they were like, well, they conquered the Greeks, so did the Vandals. Did they have an empire? No, they didn't. When you can't build a building above 2 stories, when you can't make, well, I can't say about the boat because the Cossacks were great sailors, but when you can't build, a fleet of ships that can go and take over, you're not an empire.
Yeah.
You're just a bunch of guys riding around on horses.
I like raiders.
You're just raiders that do a really good job of it. And the Huns were steppe warriors who were very adept. Their ancestors actually harried and gave Alexander fits because, and if it wasn't for his Thracian cavalry pulling him out, I mean, they may have had some serious problems. They spent 3 months fighting the steppes, the warriors of the steppes. Those were the predecessors to all of these, to Parmer Ln and the Tartars and the Cossacks, and they predated all of those people. And the Huns, ultimately, toward the end of the Roman Empire, they gave them absolute fits, and they conquered swaths of territory, but they couldn't hold on to it. They could garrison it for a little while, but when you're living out of a tent, and your headquarters is basically a circus big top,
Yeah.
you're not much of an empire. And so you can't say, yeah, we had an empire. Now, the Khans did have an empire, and I'll tell you why. Kublai actually became sort of a de facto emperor, and he conquered most of, all the way the middle of China. Northern China was all his. And he sat on the royal seat. That's the difference. He had an established capital, a headquarters.
Yeah, I was gonna say that to count as an empire, you have to be able to administrate, not just like conquer and burn everything in your way, and just kind of declare your territory by like, I have my men there, and you're gonna do what we say. It takes a lot. It takes more brain than that,
Yeah, yeah. And so when you look at what these people were able to do. And what these people were able to accomplish, it's pretty amazing. And they were able to conquer some of the Arab, countries and empires that were before them. I remember there was a story where Genghis had to go through. I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but it was an Arabic founded empire, the Abyssinian, I believe it was. And he told him, he's like, look, the people we need to kill are on the other side. We just need passage through your country. And this caliphate told him, no. And he was like, well, we're going to come through there regardless of whether you want us to or not. And he said, well, if Allah wills it. And Genghis is like, okay, well, I believe it's his will, so it's going to happen. And so he came through completely devastated and destroyed, and made a point of just absolutely destroying them, and then going and killing who he needed to kill. And then he took over that guy's whole country, whole region, which is, I believe it was what would be considered right now like northern Afghanistan, Azerbaijan area, whatever. And all he wanted to do was go to the other side. And this guy told him no, like, Genghis Khan doesn't really need your permission. He's just asking out of a courtesy, and you killed his emissaries. He sent emissaries to ask. And he says no, cuts their heads off, and sends them back to him. It was a very big mistake. And this guy ended up being like hung upside down and had various things done to him.
Well, that wasn't very nice.
Yeah, well, and that, to me, if you were back then and Genghis Khan says, hey man, I just need to go through your empire to go kill this guy on the other side, I would have just been like, who is this guy? So I can go take care of myself. Because that way I don't have you rampaging through my land if you're upset for some reason or your unruly soldiers get out of hand. let me just go deal with this guy. Whatever. Can we just send some assassins, or how does this work? Can we send a fruit basket, trick him? I don't know. Invite him to a dinner, the red wedding. I don't know. Whatever it takes. That we don't have this problem. But this guy was like, yeah, and he's so used to being the boss and thought that he was ordained by Allah to be whatever he was, and he wasn't, obviously. And he said something about, there was another one that had told him, he was a Chinese king that told him he was ordained as a god and that he would live forever. And Genghis was like, well, so that means when I kill you, you're still going to be alive? Mm-hmm. And it didn't work out for him. He absolutely didn't live forever.
So when it comes to like going back to what you were talking about with the Tartars, or like the Tartarian Empire, just to make sure I understand it. So you're saying that word Tartar was more like an umbrella term.
There was a group
like
of people
we don't. Okay, so the Tartars were a defined group of people, but they didn't have an empire. It's just that the people didn't know what was beyond their borders. They just know that, like, up north or wherever they were at, across our borders, are these people called the Tartars, and all that territory. They assumed all the territory was theirs, right?
Pretty much.
So then, would it be safe to say, like, the equivalent of that would be like if when Europeans got here and they saw the Native Americans and just referred to them as savages, that they just assumed, like, this is one group of people, and then they have an empire called the Savage Empire, I mean, is that like a good analogy?
Sort of. I mean, okay.
I guess
Like
Rome
if they
would
just
be better.
assumed that all of
Let me
mainland-
explain this. Let me explain this. Now, we're talking about Genghis Khan, and we're talking about, I know, folks, we're going to get to the stories, I promise. We're just talking about, actually, just another guy says Turkic nomads. There are a lot of those. It says Russian mathematician Fomenko says world history is false and that European historians in 1500s found nothing in Rome besides grass huts. All Roman monuments were built much later. Pretty weird stuff. Who?
Well,
Yeah, I
A
don't.
mathematician, though. That's why.
yeah, it's kind of weird.
Russia actually has a history, I'm going to say this, of having some pretty eccentric, and let's just be honest, there were some really bat crap crazy people. I mean, honestly, okay, I'm going to be real honest, and that said a lot of weird and crazy things.
And did a lot of weird and crazy things.
Like Kozyrev. I mean, I look at him as one of the exceptions to that. He was somebody who actually, was imprisoned in the gulags, and the communist gulags, came out and created his mirror, which many people attest to did what it was supposedly said to do. Go look it up, Kozyrev's mirror, Nikolai Kozyrev. But I don't tout a lot of these other, people that Russian say this and that, because they're full of crap. I'm just going to be real honest. I mean, a lot of their technology too. I'll even say this. I mean, they would have not gotten the atomic bomb. I'm sorry. The only reason they did was because they got the schematics from when they reached Germany. They were in Berlin, before the Americans and before the Allies, the British, the Americans, and the remnants of the French army. They were not, and so just knowing history, I'm going to tell you right now, don't believe that. Okay, that's not correct. Anybody, I mean, you have countless historians, countless, and you can look at the Romans as, look at how much they conquered. Literally, a quarter of the world's population lived and died under the Roman Caesars. Even more so, probably 30%, for at least 400 or 500 years. So everybody across the board is lying. Who did the Greeks? Who conquered them then? Who conquered the Greeks? Who conquered the Egyptians? It was all just an agreed upon lie by all these countries. I mean, Cleopatra. I mean, she was. Let's start with her. She was a Ptolemy. Now, who was Ptolemy? Do you know who that was? You know who that was?
Yeah, he was one of Alexander's lieutenants.
It was his illegitimate half brother. That was
Oh,
Philip's
yeah.
son. Yeah, the Ptolemies, the Ptolemaic Empire. And he was one of his generals. So she was a Ptolemy, who were a type of Greek people. That's the argument. There shouldn't even be an argument about what she looked like. There you go, right there. I mean, there's this big old, well, she was African. Well, North Africa is not, sub-Saharan Africa. There's Saharan Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. But the Ptolemies would inbreed, too. So she was she would have looked almost like an Armenian. Now, here's another thing. If you look at history, and all you got to do is just go through step by step, and you can see, okay, it'll tell you, right? The tribe that Temujin, or as you know him as Genghis, and a lot of people know him as Chinggis, it was called the Merkets, but they were not a whole tribe. They weren't together. Okay, he did the same thing that Nobunaga had to do with Japan, and Temujin actually, with his best friend, they went in and they conquered the other tribes around them. And when his dad, who was a chieftain, was killed prematurely, his mother was mistreated. And so, he set about like not only getting revenge, it started out as just kind of like him and his friend. He had a friend named Jamuka, and they started out together kind of like, hey, we're going to get back at this neighboring tribe. And eventually, but they were all Merkets. And then eventually the Merkets joined, he united them. And then they went all through the other tribes, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger until it encompassed the land we know of as Mongolia. Mongolia didn't exist the way that we know of as, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they basically founded an empire. And so he founded an empire. And the whole idea, it started off as like, he kicked these people's butts, and then it was like, I'm pretty good at this. I'm just going to keep going.
Didn't he fight with his best friend, though, after a while?
Eventually he did, yes. He killed him.
Yeah.
Had to. He turned on him. But, if you look at history and you just go step by step by step, you can see who, like you can see it. You can see how one place became another place, and then these tribes became these tribes. And if you look at Genghis Khan as an example, now then you go and you take the Tartars, for example. They had a tribe, right, that was known as the Tartars, but then they conquered all these tribes around them, subdued them, and they became bigger. But they never had an empire. When it says on a map, Tartaria, that just means that that's the land of the Tartars. That's like looking at for example, a better analogy is looking at a map of Texas, and what does it say on there from the 1830s? You got to know the answer to that.
Comancheria.
Mm-hmm. And you're like, what is that? If you're an uninitiated, you're going to go, what is Comancheria? Comancheria is the land of the Comanches. Now, it's on a map. That doesn't mean they had an empire.
Yeah.
They didn't have a capital, a seat,
It's
capital.
more like a stomping grounds.
Yeah, and so that when it's on the map, it's basically, that's where they are. Mm. And if you go into that area, you're risking death and subjugation.
Yeah, you might not find them throughout, but that's where they roam.
That's where they're at. So somebody takes a map that says Comancheria, the great Comancherian Empire, and the mud flood, and blah, 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 and wow, and this and that, and they had an empire, and blah, 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 and you're like, that's so ridiculous. Austin Berry, the Lion with the Lamb is a very weird one, dude. That is a confusing one. Gosh dang, I got a piece of glass on my leg. That's great. I fell last night, folks. I actually took a fall, and I hit both my knees and my hip, and somebody had put a bottle of Topo Chico up on the bar in our house, and it fell. And I have glass, and I pulled some glass. My wife pulled some glass out of the side of my leg. Now I found another piece stuck in there. That's great. Now I got to go try to cut that out, and pray for me, please. Anyway, do you know the capital of Mongolia by any chance? Don't look at your phone.
I did
You were talking
at one
about it.
point.
Starts with a U. Well, before somebody says it on their Ulaanbaatar, although somebody just did.
I wouldn't.
Thanks,
have guessed it anyway.
Phil. Thanks, Phil.
Phil.
Leave it to a German to be smart
I wouldn't
and
have
do
guessed
that. You're smart because you can read.
You people in your brains.
But anyway, Ulaanbaatar, anyway, let's get to what we were talking about here. And oddly enough, I actually have a Mongolian werewolf story. When Adam Davies was on the show and we talked about the Mongolian death worm, somebody messaged me and says, I worked and lived in Ulaanbaatar, and they said that they actually had a werewolf story from there, which is interesting. I'll get into that maybe one day. But for right now, folks, what do you guys want to hear? We got a bunch of different stuff. Sorry we took so long talking about history. I don't know how much you enjoy talking about history and science, but it is a part of what we do because it's all part of the same stuff. If you don't know those subjects, how do you know about any of this?
Were there a bunch of like different Tartar tribes in that area, or was it just like one? Okay.
I mean, there were other tribes that were all turned into the Tartars, and then the Cossacks. It's the timeline's a little weird because the Tartars rose up a little bit before the Cossacks, and nobody knows where the Cossacks came from. That's the weird thing. The Cossacks just kind of showed up in that region, and they were a genetic anomaly. Their closest relative, a lot of people thought they came from Hungary, which would make sense because the Hungarians' closest relative, which is weird because they're Eastern European, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the Hungarians' closest genetic relatives are from where? Do you know?
Scandinavia?
Yeah,
Or-
Finnish.
yeah.
Very weird. And their language is almost like a Finnish language. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't match up to Romanian, Bulgarian, or any of those other languages. And they're not Austrian, although they shared the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They shared a culture with them for a while, but they weren't the same people. And so they actually, it gets really weird. There's a theory that the Cossacks, and I believe this too, because you look at how big they are. I mean, a lot of them are very, if you look at them, I think what happened was, the Vikings. I need to wear my bifocals. The Vikings, they came down from the north and they raided everything. I mean, they sacked every city, everything, and they raided. And they bred with everybody. And I think what happened was a group of Vikings probably would have been something like maybe Norwegian, Finnish, whatever, came down, fought their way through there, found kind of a spot that was not warm by our standards, but warmer than where they came from, and in a lush area where they could actually live and, whatever, raise their horses. And so they just took it over. And they killed everybody within 500 miles and created Comancheria East, and then eventually that brought them into conflict with the locals, which the Tartars to the east, they were still a very powerful tribe and they were warlike. And the initial conflict, I think, started because the Tartars were used to going to the west and invading. They show up there and they're like, wait a minute, where are all the Polish, Ukrainian and Russian peasants? Instead, we have these giant warriors with axes.
That dude's picking up horses and
Yeah,
bench
they
pressing.
do. They
yeah.
bench. Yeah, you saw it. Yeah,
Whoops.
and so they were like, "Yeah, we're here now." Okay, but before there were other people that we would kill. Well, you're not going to kill us because we will kill you. No, that's not going to happen. We're here now to kill the people that were here before us. But since you killed people before, now we're going to kill you. No, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't believe that. I don't like that solution. I believe solution to be we kill you. And so that's what we do. We kill you now. And then that's what happened. I believe that's probably how the conversation went down. Don't quote me, but it's probably what happened.
According to my sources, that is exactly how it happened.
Yeah.
Maybe they played
According to
rock,
CNN.
maybe they played rock, paper, scissors to figure out who kills who, and they just agreed to it.
And they're like, okay, 2 out of 3. Oh, I lost again.
Yeah. Okay.
Shucks. Now I get my head removed from shoulder.
Please open throat now. Go ahead.
Not good.
You win fair and square.
And then of course the famous picture of them. If you've never read this, it's hilarious. You should check it out. of the Cossacks' response to the Sultan of Turkey.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
The
yeah.
Ottoman
That's
Sultan.
that's
That is so insulting, dude.
yeah. That's a letter you have to go read on Wikipedia because we can't
We can't
read it to
repeat
you
it,
here.
but
It's
they
so
said
vulgar.
they insulted the Sultan, who the Turks, the Ottomans thought, oh, we're badass. We defeated the Byzantines. We took Constantinople, and the Sultan basically told them to stand down or be destroyed, and the Cossacks gave him a response, and they said, we don't care that you took that city. We can take it from you anytime we want. He says, come try it. And so they said, okay. 3 months later, they were sacking it, they rampaged it, and they made off with his harem. They took all of his wives.
Which they said they would do.
Which they said they would do. They were Black Sea pirates, and they showed up, and they just killed everyone, and they did what they were going to do. And they told the Sultan, like, you're the master of this and the whatever of that, and we don't care. We don't really give a crap. And, we're going to show up, and we're going to destroy you. We don't care how many people you've made submit to the Ottoman Empire, which was an Islamic empire. And once again, their arrogance got them in trouble. And the Cossacks taught them a very, very, very valuable lesson about making threats. And if you're going to make threats, you better be able to follow through with them. It's as simple as that. And so anyway, here's what I'm going to tell you, folks. We're going to get to the stories here. Enough history talk. I know people are going to start getting anxious if we keep talking about it. I have to tell you this, okay? And it's very important. The conference is coming up. You have 3 weeks left. Get your tickets now, okay? Because we have sold tickets every day. They've been selling. We still have a few of the VIPs. So if you want your tickets, get them. And here we go. I think people were asking for the werewolf stories. I have a werewolf story, if that's what it is. Now, it's always subject to you, the listener, to decide what it is. And if that's what you guys want to hear, then that's what we'll do. But it involves mirrors. And I'm going to say this. I am not a fan of mirrors, okay? I don't even like our bathroom having more than one mirror in there. It's really weird, kind of freaky. But there was a guy, he was living in Idaho. And I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of whatever. This guy had what he believes was an encounter with a upright canid bipedal wolf-like creature while he was driving home from a hunting trip with two of his friends. And one of his friends did something really stupid. And I'll tell you this. If you ever see a werewolf, don't throw a can of beer at it. That's the moral to the story.
Well, maybe he threw the wrong kind of beer at it. I mean,
maybe.
if somebody threw like a Coors Light at me, I'd be very mad.
Well, I think it was a Coors. I think it was the banquet.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
Don't insult me with that.
It's the banquet beer, dude. I don't know what banquets it's at. But
Oh,
they
yeah,
call
like
it
Miller
Dog man
Highlight.
chased him down. This is like, not another
Why don't
Coors
you just
drinker.
throw a Mad Dog
Was
2020
it
at
the
me?
Bush head
or,
first.
Just throw water at me.
Just throw a 211 Steel Reserve at my head while you're at it.
Still reserved.
Just throw an ice house at me.
But
Yeah.
anyway, they were driving, and he said this happened back in like 1999, and they were driving, and 2009, and his buddy throws a beer can out the window at this what looked like a bipedal creature that was kind of hunched down, and when it ran across the road, and when they saw it, and it was almost dark, not quite, and it was hunched down. It got down on the side of the road. His buddy throws a beer can out the window at it and believes he hit it. And he goes, "What? Why did you do that?" And he says, "I don't know. I saw that bear-looking thing run across the road." He goes, "Bear-looking thing?" And then there was an argument. And Clark, the guy that gave me the story, I'll tell you this. He told his friend, he says, "Dude, first of all, we don't know what that was. Bear looking whatever. It looked like a werewolf." And the friend in the back said, "Yeah, it did." Well, the friend on the driver's side said, "Well," the passenger side says, "Well, how do you know? You were in the back seat. You couldn't." So it was a big argument. So the guy in the back seat and the driver got into a big argument, and he says it looked like a freaking, an animal. And he tells him, "No, it wasn't an animal. I don't know what it was." Well, he sent me this story after we had talked about the bear men, He got another look at it. He says, at that point, I was about 11 miles from my house, which is where my friends' vehicles were. We got back home. We didn't talk about it. We didn't give it another thought. My friend had been drinking, and I told him, hey, stay here, sober up a little bit. So he took his advice. They calmed down. And then the other guy says, look, I got to get back. The guy in the back seat, I got to go, my wife, whatever. A couple days go by, he doesn't hear from his friend from the back seat of the vehicle. The friend in the back seat of the vehicle calls him up a couple days later, says, hey, your wife told my wife that you wanted to speak to me. He says, yeah, I just wanted to make sure everything was okay. You know, Kenny, his friend, who threw the beer out the window, you know, there was an argument and whatever, and he sobered up before he left, and he said, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. And he's like, but who cares? What's the big deal? They were just still kind of freaked out at what they saw. It was blackish brown with a big ridge on its back, and it ran and it jumped down into a ditch, and then it turned like it was kind of getting down, like it was hiding. They did see on the other side of the road what looked like a dead animal. They couldn't make out exactly what it was. They saw a hoof. They don't know. He says, I don't know what that was, but it was, I get a bad feeling about this. He said the first couple of nights he went home. This is Clark, the guy who was driving. Went to sleep. Says I couldn't sleep. Just having dreams, but I couldn't remember. Thank you for that donation, Frank. Appreciate that. He says I was having dreams, you know, and I couldn't sleep. He said I don't know what was going on. And the next day, went through the day. I kind of walked through my day, went to work, came home. Same thing. Felt like I couldn't sleep. And he's like, and so I was thinking, you know, about calling you, but I was waiting to see if you were going to call me. And then finally I did try to call you, and your phone was like, you weren't answering. It was going to voicemail, whatever. So I just wanted to make sure you were okay. It's been a couple, 3 days, whatever. And his friend says, well, actually, same thing happened to me. I've been able to sleep, having nightmares. I don't remember them. And he's like, have you talked to Ken? And he's like, no, I haven't talked to him. Let's call him. I said, okay. Got off the phone. His friend called him. Calls him back, very frantic. Says that his friend was, according to his friend's wife, on a bender because he did drink and had gone out to a local bar and gotten punched out and then threatened to shoot himself and do all kinds of other crazy things that was not characteristic of this guy, although he had started drinking pretty heavily. Prior to the trip, he had not been a big drinker, which was odd for his wife. She was like, you know, like they went on a trip, they drank a few beers, but he was not drinking like all the time. It wasn't like an everyday thing. And after the trip, 3 days after, I guess it was, he said nothing but just drinking straight like a bender, you know. Finally get a hold of him. He's holed up in a hotel in a small town outside of Boise. And he tells him, he says, dude, I'm not doing good. And he's like, what's wrong? He said, I feel like that thing, he called it, that I threw the beer can at has been after me. And he's like, you mean that weird looking animal? And his friend says, that's not an animal. I don't know what it was, but it's not an animal. And he says, this thing has been showing up in my dreams. And he says, well, yeah, me and the other guy, I don't know the other guy's name, but he said, me and so-and-so have not been sleeping well. Clark told him that. He said, I've been having bad, restless sleep, nightmares. I don't remember them. He says, I remember mine. And Kenny told him, he says, I remember every one of them. He said, at one point I woke up, hungover, of course, I've been drinking. And he goes, this thing was literally on all fours. The way he described it was sitting like a dog. You know how dogs sit with their legs out in front like this?
Yeah.
He was staring at him, and as soon as he opened his eyes, he said, I saw it. It looked just like the creature, except a little more sleek and was more defined. Didn't have like scraggly hair all over it. It looked very polished. And he said, I looked at it and its ears were tall and it just kind of stared at me with human-like eyes. He said at that point, it began to growl. And it walked over to the edge of the bed, he goes, and opened its mouth really wide. And I just went unconscious. He's like, well, how do you know, there wasn't the booze and you weren't in your right mind and you just woke up and you had been hungover and you were having a bad dream. He's like, no, I woke up. I saw this creature and I went back to sleep. It was not one of those where you have a dream, where you wake up and you're still dreaming.
Yeah.
No. He was very adamant. He told his friend that. It's the friend that told me. And he said, no, that's not what happened. That is not what was going on with this. This creature at the foot of my bed. He called his wife. He says, I'm sorry. I'm a mess. I need help. I just didn't register to his wife like really what was going on. So when she talked to this guy, Clark, he says, look, we were driving home, at that point we were about 12, 13 miles from my homestead there, where he lived. Your husband throws a beer can out the window and hits this wolf bear-like creature that we saw run across the road. And then he mocked it, like made a joke about it, like it was funny. And maybe that's what sparked this. I don't know. He also made a comment to me that made me wonder, because he said he felt like there was some intent there from this creature, not really so much to prove a point, but the fact that him and the other guy were so adamant that he was offensive in the way that he did what he did, making light of it and saying swear words and to the creature, out the window.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I don't know to this day. Now, he says it really bothers him because he thinks that maybe they gave it some sort of energy or power through their fear, or maybe they gave it some sort of credence, by acknowledging it. You know how when we were kids, when we talked about these creatures, Anthony, we were told to not acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And these guys maybe did. It went a little too far, and he feels like maybe we gave it some energy we shouldn't have.
I think it could just be like haunted house rules, where if you touch the actor, they're allowed to touch you back. It could be like, since they interacted with it first, then it was like, you gave me permission.
Well, throwing a beer can, like I said, would not be my first move if I see one of these. And I've never seen one run across the road other than my encounter when I was 15. I haven't seen one like run across the road and go, what was that? If I did, I wouldn't throw something out the car and talk trash. I'm not going to do that. Call me crazy, but it's not high on my bucket list. Whenever and I'm going to say this, if you ever are out and about and you come across something that's anomalous like this, do yourself a favor and do everyone else a favor and don't antagonize it. Because what we're dealing with definitely is not an animal. Now, maybe it's not a supercharged interdimensional being. Like I was recently challenged or chastised in a group saying that. I didn't say that, but somebody said I said that. But there's definitely more to this than just them being some sort of physical creature.
Even if it was just a bear, don't be throwing stuff at bears.
Yeah.
Like, I just feel like don't throw stuff at big animals.
Don't even throw stuff out the window in the countryside, really, but you make really good decisions when you're on that Coors Light. So,
yeah.
I don't know what kind of beer he was drinking. I just know he threw a beer can. But here's the thing. When he threw this thing and cursed it, and then the franticness that went on after that, I think that it gave this thing some sort of cause or energy, whatever. What ultimately ended up happening was his friend ended up having to go to an outreach church type program. Ultimately, that wasn't right away. That his life kind of devolved to the point where he ended up, his marriage was on the rocks. It got really bad, and it all started with that trip, and it was all because of him. I think because of what he did. And I can't sit here and tell you 100% that that's, I don't know the whole, like I can't give you the whole 411 on what, like he may have had a lot of other problems going on. Can you open that for me, please? Oh, mouth is really dry. So I can't tell you exactly what was going on with this guy. Somebody says scary. Love cat. No, it gets a lot more scary. This story was one of those where when you start hearing it, it can be scary. The subject matter, it gets, kind of creepy. I put it on par kind of with the Choctaw tribal police officer that talked to me about what happened to him. It was like, Tony, you were there at the casino. It was creepy. Mm-hmm. We were all sitting there listening and we were like enthralled by what he was saying, but it was, if you were him, you'd been scared out of your mind. So what ended up happening, he says, look, I couldn't be at my house because every time I was at my house, I would see this thing in the mirror. And the guy that was telling me this, he says, look, I didn't see anything until about a month after. And when he said that he saw something, this guy told him, hey, man, I'm seeing this thing in the mirror. When I go home, I'm seeing it. I was at the beer joint. I was throwing darts. I saw it in the mirror. He said, what does it look like? I got to take these out. My eyes are hurt. My head's hurting. He says it looked like a werewolf, about 7 foot tall, huge, bear-like body. The legs are backward bent. So he goes home. Finally, his wife gets him to come home. And this is his friend, Kenny, the one that threw the beer. And his wife tells him, hey, take a bath, a hot bath. It'll do you some good. Maybe you can sober up. He lays in the bath. He's sitting there, and she puts like a wash rag over his face, whatever, his eyes. He's laying there enjoying it, and he hears flap, 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 flap. And he's like, what is that? He takes the wash rag off, and he looks. At first, he's like, I'm just looking down, and I just see like black hair. I see legs. He goes, I'm looking up, and I see this thing just sitting there. His face is just bubbling up and down. He said bubbling. That's just what he told his friend. It's like, it was like there was some sort of like, it was morphing. And it was like a shimmering kind of like, I knew exactly. His friend was trying to explain it to me. And I said, I know what you're talking about. It's that blurriness that you see sometimes with these creatures or spirits. And he looks down and he sees these muscular black legs, just like a werewolf. He said, dude, it was like, this is what the guy said. He's like, I've seen dog soldiers. Have you ever seen? I said, yes, I have. He said, the legs, the way the legs looked. He's like, or howling. They had those kind of legs, not like these fake werewolf. But this is what he said. But I know what he's getting at. He said these fake werewolf movies or whatever. He goes, this was like real, He said this thing reaches over with its hand to grab this guy, and then he reaches up to kind of stop it, and it begins to push down on him. Next thing you know, he's being held. He feels the physical presence of being held under the water. His wife comes into the bathroom. Now get this. This is where it gets really freaky. Christy, his wife, this is her name. She comes in. She sees him struggling under the water. His legs are thrashing about and his hands are like this. She doesn't see anything. Like with her own eyes, she doesn't see a creature pushing him into the water, trying to kill him. Until she looks over and she looks at the mirror. Then she's like, oh my gosh. And she's like, literally, she's like, I felt like, according to what she told him, or the guy's best friend, she's like, I felt like my soul was going to come out of my body through my heart. She's like, my blood pressure must have gone up 1,000 points. She's like, I felt like my ears were tingling. She's like, I felt like my nose was going to fall off. She's like, it was unreal. She's like, I could feel all this electric energy in the air. And she's like, and this creature looked like it turned its head and literally looked at her through the mirror and smiled at her, like gave her like a smirk. And it was killing her husband. And she's like, I don't know how to react because I don't see it with my eyes. I see it in a mirror. I don't see it with my eyes. And the guy that it was happening to, Ken, said eventually he got loose. And when he got up out of the tub because, are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
Might want to drink some coffee or something. It looks like you're really, really heavy. You're hitting the wall there.
Yeah.
Sorry, Anthony's really tired. We've been pushing really hard trying to get this stuff done. We're all really tired. When this thing had him was pushing him down into the tub and he was struggling, he said, I could open my eyes and through the water, there was nothing there. He didn't see it anymore. It was like it was invisible. And eventually it just stopped. For whatever reason, it stopped. What the reason was is because I believe his wife grabbed a cross off of the wall. This is what she said to Clark. And I actually got a statement from her. I didn't talk to her. And she went over and she like swung it in the air. She said in the area of where the thing was, but it was nothing there. She wasn't hitting anything. It wasn't like it was cloaked. It was definitely just energy in the air. It stopped. Now, you can make the argument that maybe she disrupted some sort of electromagnetic energy, or maybe it was the cross. I don't know. I mean, 100%. I do believe that the power of prayer, the power of God, Christ, works. That's my personal opinion. You don't have to believe that. All you have to do is listen to what I'm telling you. And you don't even have to do that. But please. This thing was holding the guy down. Once it let go, that was it. It was gone. They spent a night huddled together in the living room with their children who were small and thought, oh, we're all just going to camp out in the den. Not knowing what had just happened. They just knew that daddy wasn't feeling too good, but they were going to camp in the den. So they had fun and they kind of just made sleeping bag, whatever. She's like, thank goodness my kids were too small to know what was going on. But this wasn't it. She gets in the car to go to work about a week later, and it was no other incidents for a little while. Then she gets in the car, and she says that she's starting the vehicle up, a Toyota Pathfinder or whatever. This thing, she feels like something grabbed her face, and she looks up, and in the mirror, she sees this creature like holding her like that. Eventually, it culminated with her going outside and screaming on her deck and yelling to this thing, show yourself to me, come to me and face me. Tell me, what do you want? What is it that you want? And she said, in the name of Jesus, tell me what you want. She's like, I'm on my back deck screaming like a crazy person. Horrible. Horrible situation. She sees this thing. She hears. Then she sees it. The feet. Then the arms. Then this head. And then the chest. Everything comes out of the woods. And it's growling like the whole time. Taking one step at a time coming to me. She's like, it felt like an eternity. It was walking toward me. I was like, what did you do? I'm sitting here reading him, talking to myself. I'm thinking, like, what did you do? She said, I had the Bible in one hand, a flashlight in the other. My husband was ill. He was sick. He was throwing up, not feeling good. He was in bed. She's like, I'm telling this creature, come to me. She sees it. It stands there right in her backyard. Weird thing. They had two dogs. Both of them were on either side of her, both growling, but both laying down, very calm, but growling. You know how our dogs, they low guttural growl when they just lay there. And she said they didn't move. But she said I felt empowered in that moment. And I felt like my dogs would have given their life to protect me. And she's like, I laid the Bible down and I opened it up and I started reading it. And then she said this thing eventually spoke to my mind, in my mind. A lot of people say it's mind speak. I say telepathy, whatever. And this is what it said. It told her, it says, I am real. And she's like, that's it? That's the big reveal? That's your revelation? You are tormenting my husband because he threw a beer can at you and you show up in my backyard to tell me that you were real. She's like, well, congratulations, demon. We get it. You're real. And she's like, what do you want? No response. Just a weird, staticky feeling in her head. And then she says, go away and leave us alone and don't mess with my family anymore. Be done. We're done with you. Go away. I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. Get out of here. Just everything. And it said, okay. It turned around, walked off. She said, I saw this weird looking tail, just like a werewolf. Then it got down on all fours and ran into the woods. And guess what? It was gone. But it wasn't done. It was done with them. Clark, who I think is a really nice guy, just from, hour-long conversation I had, very nice. He seems like a very nice guy. I don't know the guy. He might, could do all kinds of heinous stuff. He could walk in and get an ice cream and not pay.
Oh,
He could be one of those kind of people who borrows a tool and doesn't give it back. I don't know the guy.
The derelict.
I just hit derelict. Joking. I'm joking, Clark. You seem like a very nice man. But what I do know is that I believe in his honesty. He's just a country boy. I'm not saying that makes you an honest person. But he just said, look, man, I got nothing to gain by this. I'm just telling you what happened. Next day, she's talking to his wife. With him and this guy, they grew up together. They're friends. They all know each other. She says, this is what I did. I got rid of it. I said, well, that's great. I'm glad this is over. Right? Clark gets up, goes to the bathroom, does his number one business, whatever. He's like, I turn and I look, and he goes, and I jump and I fall back onto the wall, and I just slid down the wall. He goes, didn't even have my drawers on. Look over, and there's this creature standing there. I don't see it, but I see it in the mirror. He's like, it was there, and then it was gone. Next day, he's like, I called my preacher. He's like, I called him. I said, look, dude, there's something going on. And his preacher didn't even want to hear it. He was just like, well, you just got to pray. And he goes, he gave me nothing to work with. It's a demon. Pray it away. Just pray it away. So he goes in there the next day, and he goes to get ready for work, and he hears this scream. There's this yell. And it's his oldest son. And his son comes running down the stairs. He's like, Dad, I saw something in the mirror. It was standing behind me. I saw something in the mirror. And he's like, calm down. His son's 15 years old. He's like, look, calm down. Tell me what you saw. He goes, you're not going to believe me, Dad. I know you're not going to believe me. He doesn't know anything about all this. And he said, no. What did it look like? And he told him, and he said, oh, my gosh. What happened to his son? Terrifying anybody, especially a kid. No, I was 15 when I saw what I saw. I don't know why. We get a lot of people that are 15. That's weird. We were talking about that a few days ago, weren't we?
Yeah.
15, weird, age. And people see these things. A lot of people see them at that age. I don't know why that is. We even tried to figure out a numeric reason for it. We were with Nellie. We're all trying to do the math, trying to figure out, why. I don't know. 15 and 17 seem to be prime numbers for that. Why? This thing. Says I was brushing my teeth. Put some water on my face. It was like, getting ready, go to school, whatever. Lifts up his head, and it's standing right behind him. He could see it all around his body. It was there for a second, it was gone. So his friend's wife comes over. At this point, she feels like she's dealt with it. She went outside and faced this thing by herself. She comes over, they pray, they go through the house. And that was it. I mean, there wasn't no real dramatic conclusion. It just stopped. It was over. When you have people tell you these kind of stories. Now, what's crazy is this guy originally didn't know anything about me. Somebody turned him on to me. When they tried to tell this story to someone else, the person kept putting them off, saying, yeah. And didn't, that was it. He asked me what I thought, my opinions. I said, sir, obviously you were crazy as a loon and you were on drugs. And I hung up. I'm joking. I did not do that. I did not do that.
Yeah, he was not crazy like a loon.
I didn't. He was not crazy like a loon and on drugs. And then I just hung up. Now, folks, what I told this guy, I said, dude, I hear stories all the time. And I said, he's like, do you believe me? I said, yeah, I believe you. What do you have to gain by this? He's not selling me a story. I'm not paying for it. What does a person have to gain? Thank you for that donation, Corley. It says, maybe don't think of it in terms of years old, maybe how many cycles of the moon old you are. Oh, there you go. But I can tell you this. I told him, I said, having seen, thank you, Larry, for that generous donation. I appreciate it. Fisher & Sons Roofing. Don't forget, if you have a roof that needs to be repaired, Larry Fisher can do it. He's got really good crews, very competitive rates. He's a sponsor, proud sponsor of Paranormal Roundtable. If you haven't got your tickets, get your tickets, and you can talk to Larry in person and talk to him about roofs because he loves to talk about it. This person tells me, look, I have nothing to gain by this. I'm just telling you what happened to me and my family. I don't care. You can use my name. Just don't use my last name. You can call me whatever you want. I don't care. Just thought I'd tell you. I met him through a guy named Joe. And, well, Joe and Job, they're brothers. And they said, hey, we got a guy who's got a crazy story about these things, and let him tell you. Now, Job had seen a Bigfoot, a very terrifying story in its own right, and I haven't finished reading it and getting it fleshed out. But you get these stories all the time. Like, every day, I get these stories. I go through my messenger. It's every day. Just reading the stories, just Bigfoot out in the field looking at somebody through the window and just doing all kinds of, doing what they do. But when they start coming into your house and appearing to you, that's kind of when you should be like, okay, maybe we're not dealing with a normal flesh and blood. Not only is it not an animal, but it is obviously not even an animal with human level intelligence. That's not what we're dealing with here. It goes well beyond that. It's evil to me.
Yeah. And it's also interesting to me that people never question, like, oh, I saw Bigfoot in the woods, like at my old hunting spot. But for some reason, when I go back to my home, that same Bigfoot managed to track me all the way to my home. They don't think like, well, how did it track you? Is it just supposed to be this amazing tracker? It could track anybody thousands of miles away. You can move to Nebraska from Florida, and they'll be like, oh, I know exactly where you're at. Like, that doesn't make sense to me that they just instinctively or just know where you're going and follow you anyway. Mm-hmm. Like, there has to be something else to that. It can't just be that they're just amazing at it.
Do you remember Daryl? Well, you probably remember it because Armando was friends with the guy, Daryl Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and he had the story out of Brownwood.
Mhm.
My original co-host. Thank you for that donation, Kate Hunter. That's very generous of you.
Oh,
Really
wow.
appreciate it.
Thank you
It's
for
going to
that.
go toward the conference. Daryl Lewis, and now Armando had it in his notes as Daryl Lewis. I'm going to tell you, I don't know if that's his real name. He looked Hispanic to me. Now, I'm Hispanic. My mother was Hispanic. My last name's Turner. I go by the name of Josue Pablo Turner. I think it sounds eclectic, but that's just me. No, seriously though, Daryl looked full-blooded Mexican to me. That's and I only spoke to him one time. And it was a very choppy Skype call. He told Armando, and I know you, Tony, you fielded some reports with Armando. You and him were kind of buddies with that, y'all. He told them a pretty amazing story. What happened was one of these things that he saw, literally out in the panhandle of West Texas, followed him about 280 miles to Brownwood. How is that possible? Now, at that time, we were still of the idea that these things we could be dealing with a flesh and blood creature. And Armando was like, "Man, they can track you from a long ways away." But then you interviewed the one girl who had lived in Mexico and in Arizona and in Colorado.
Yeah, she basically just moved as far away.
Or was it Utah? Was it Colorado or Utah? She moved.
It was Utah, I think.
Utah.
Yeah. Because I would have known if it was Colorado because,
Yeah, but here's the thing. Yeah.
I was born there.
You were born there, so you always notice Colorado stories. Tony likes to look into Colorado stories from Colorado. So is Alec. So y'all two both are kind of like. But here's the thing. I told you back then, did I not say this? I said these things didn't physically track them. Did I not say that?
Yeah, you said they had to mark him somehow, spiritually or whatever.
Spiritually mark them somehow. I'm not saying I'm the first one to come up with this, okay? I'm not the first. I didn't invent the wheel, okay? But to me, it's like common sense says, hey, at some point you have to face the facts that this is not a normal flesh and blood creature.
Even in that, that point, we were
we were already on the cusp.
If we were on the fence, we were definitely just standing on it, but we were still very much hey, these are some sort of physical being with spiritual aspects, instead of now being these are spiritual beings with physical aspects. And even at that point, though, you were just it doesn't make sense. And there's no way that there's no animal that will just track you for that long, for that far away, multiple times, multiple different, no matter where you go, it will just follow you. This one girl that we're talking about, that's not just normal, oh, she just ran into new creatures. No, she was very specific. I know these were the same ones because I recognized their unique coloration, and they followed me everywhere, and they wouldn't leave me alone. And then, even in the Bigfoot book, there's some stories in there that are the same way. It goes, I was in here, things happen, so me and my family decides to move away, and these things wouldn't let up. It didn't matter where we went. And it's just bizarre to me that they're so heavy, they're so set in their ways of they had to track you. How did they track you? Because it's not like they can... It's not like you're walking in the woods. It's not like you're leaving marks everywhere. More than likely, you drove hundreds of miles or flew, which is even worse. Is how did they just know where to go?
And the one from this last story pulled some kind of Freddy Krueger stunt, attacking him in his own bathtub, and then appearing to everyone who saw him in their dreams.
Here's one thing I thought was interesting about that story. And anybody can tell me if you agree or disagree, but I thought what was weird was and I asked her and I asked Clark this, I said, why didn't it just tear his face off? Why did it try to drown him? Why did it just hold him underwater and then, because, and maybe I can answer my own question, after having posed it, like immediately just kind of posed it, I thought about it later on. I know what he said, which was, I have no idea. But what I thought later on, I was driving, and you know how you just kind of, you go through your day, two places that seem to come up with things that I think about. It's like I'm driving or I'm in the shower, you know, and you're just like, whoa, that's weird. Like, you know, I come up with like theories and postulate to myself, you know. I thought, what if it knows, like, if it tears someone apart in their own house, it's going to make a weird, you know what I mean? Something weird. And then somebody could say, well, we saw this weird creature over here in this area. Then they could say, well, there's a connection, and then it makes some sort of weird, you know what I mean? Like,
Well,
or it could be like Rick Atchison said, the legalities.
well, to me, it sounds like personal. It sounds like, you know, just
Well,
coming.
why didn't it just tear his face off?
Because
Why
it'd be too
drown
easy.
him?
Like, it sounds like it was trying to psychologically break him. It was trying to make him have like a mental breakdown. Even in that moment, I believe that the cross definitely stopped him, but I don't think it was actually trying to kill him in that moment. I think it was just trying to torment him over and over and over again.
And then maybe kill him?
And then, like, when he's at his wit's end, then they'll be like, you know, oh, did a beer can really cost all this? Maybe not to you, but it's worth it to me. And like,
And then why was it so intent on telling, you know, Christy that, oh, I'm real? Like,
because I think
it's like there's an arrogance about it. Like it has to, you know,
yeah,
like they feel superior or something. I don't know what that is. I just,
I don't
that
know.
to me is very disturbing because it makes me feel like there's something that it has to prove. Like it feels like it has to prove something to us. And like if we are mere mortals to this creature and we're nothing, then why do you care what we say or do? Why is it that it's so important that you make sure that we know that you're at the top of the food chain? I mean, dude, if we're out in the woods and we see you, well, we know you're at the top of the food chain.
Well,
I mean, you know,
the driver and the
Pride.
one in the back seat were like, you know, that was definitely not, that was something else. But he was like, oh, it was a bear. It was just with some random animal. So it could just be like, I'm no mere animal. I'm definitely, you know, like, don't doubt me. I'm something else. You saw correctly. Or if you don't doubt me, like, don't doubt your friends as well. Like, don't think that just because you know that you think you know what you saw, you can antagonize me and get away with it. It could be something like that. And I saw a comment that said polar bears can track you, but there's nothing but ice and water. I don't think it would be that difficult to figure out new smells.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. You're still talking. Are you?
No, I was just saying that.
Dogs and cats have been known to go clear across. I read a story from people that moved from New York, upstate New York, and they moved to Illinois, and this cat found them. There was an even more amazing account of one moving from like California to Missouri, and it was a dog, you know, and they're dogs and cats. I mean, they've done this, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that if this was a real flesh and blood creature. What's going on? So I thought maybe it was work or something, but I understand that. I get that can happen, but it just seems like, you know, with these creatures, it's like there's a vendetta. A dog and a cat are doing it because they want to be with their families. They got lost or separated, and so they move heaven and earth to try to find their loved ones. The cases for this to do this out of sheer, you know, just wanting revenge. It's just hard to take because I've heard a story like you know, the guy, I think it was the guy that wrote Death in the Long Grass. It was a story about big game hunting in Africa, which I know is a controversial subject, but let's be honest, the Africans themselves are killing the animals as fast as they can make them. I mean, they really are the ones doing most of the killing. It's not, you know, and I get it. It's crushing poverty and it's all these other things, and it's not a comfortable subject to talk about. And the biggest markets for these creatures, you know, tusks and all these other things, horns, whatever, are in East Asia. So, you know, do the math. I mean, you know, there's a problem there. Okay. But this was a guy who had written a book, but he was a hunter. And there was a book, and I had the book, I read it. And talking about how dangerous, the other day we were talking about this, about the Cape buffalo, how dangerous they are. There was one that was shot and wounded by a guy, and I don't think this was in the book, but there's a story I read about it. And it followed them, and 2 days later, it came charging out of the brush, and it killed that dude. And then it went off and died. They found it like a few kilometers away, dead from it bled out. But not before it gored that dude and threw him in the air and broke him in half. So, I mean, you know, there are animals that will do that.
That's are fueled by like some kind of vengeance or rage.
But this definitely was no animal because of the way that it was invisible to the naked eye, but it was being seen in the mirror.
I saw a comment earlier that said something like they didn't want to incur that karmic debt. And if like those are how the rules work, is like, you know, you have like I don't obviously don't know exactly, but like he can't just go and kill this thing for a minor slight like that. So that's why he was just terrorizing him, making him, you know, feel just absolute terror. But it was more like, you know, I don't want to kill him for something like that, even though, but he did piss me off, so I'm going to ruin everything he knows and just make it so that his life is a living hell.
Yeah. So, anyways, somebody says he had to pay the piper. Apparently he did. So we got some other stuff here. I got a skinwalker story. Got a ghost story. Both are pretty compelling, pretty scary. I don't know. We got a reptilian story. It seems like whenever we talk about it, we get more stories of, obviously. What else do we got?
Oh, let's see. The 3 stories we talked about on Friday were the ranch story, the Dogman mirrors, which we just did. What was the third one?
Yeah, and this one we had talked about doing last week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We had gone over this one. And then there's the skinwalker story, which I'm probably going to save for a Tuesday. I was going to do that for the recording. You know. Yes, Janine, we heard about Scott. Any evil clown entities? Yeah, but I'm not. I don't have them memorized. And, yeah, they're prepared. I would have to go back and look. There was one I got not too long ago. It was out of I think Albany, New York, or something like that. It was weird. Or maybe that's the. That could have been a different one. I don't know. I'm trying to think of which one it was, where it was at. I got one out of Salem, Oregon, which was pretty weird, and I think it involved it was a haunting where something used a clown to be scary. You know,
clowns piss me off.
Yeah, clowns suck, dude. Even when I was a kid, I never liked them.
Well, I told you about that recurring nightmare I used to have when I was younger. Because of that, I've never liked clowns, and they've always just pissed me off to no end. And it's like it's just something like in me that like when I see one, it reminds me of those nightmares I used to
have. Adam, that whole phantom clown period that was going on years back was something. I don't know. What do you think
about the phantom clown?
Oh, we should tell. I think Anthony said we're going to do a potluck for the not this Tuesday's episode, but recording
next week. Yeah. Let's see. You got any more immortal stories?
People are asking about those. Not off the top of my head, no.
Leprechauns or like gremlins or any short things?
Is that something you want to hear, or people are asking for that?
Something I want to hear. I mean, those some of those stories are fun to me. I know Anthony doesn't like them.
Well, I don't know. River monsters. I got one. I'll give the merman, the mer
Oh, yeah,
folk
that's
story. That was a good one. This one happened off the coast of Korea. I got two. I got a couple different ones. One's not real long. It's not real in depth, but it is still. It's creepy, and it gives you it gives you a pause. It makes you think. You know. It says putting the grands to bed and Destin will listen later. Wolf Kate inspired me to up the gift. Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank Kate for that. I appreciate it. Here's a weird thing that happened off the coast of Korea. And I'll tell you this. The girl, her dad was a soldier stationed there in Korea, and her mother was Korean. And her dad's friend that they would go out with sometimes, he had children a little older than her, but they were close to the same age. And they went out on a boat to go look. I don't remember what she said, whales or dolphins or something. I don't remember exactly what it was they were looking at. But she said this was years ago. And she said, and she's like about, I think 40 or something like that, or around 40 years old, if I remember correctly. So I don't know. She was a child. They went out onto a boat, and she said that there was a guy that was acting really weird. Now, of course, after the fact, there were people who said, "Oh, he was acting weird," and who knows if he was if that's if he was really if anybody really noticed how weird he was until after it happened. She didn't notice because she was a child. But he took off his jacket and eventually his shirt and his clothes, and he jumped into the water. And once again, she was on the boat. She, with her own eyes, did not see this. But this story supposedly made it into some tabloids, like at the time, you know. And she said that it was shocking. Like, he was there by himself. It was like a little boat tour or whatever. They were way out in the middle of nowhere in the ocean, and he jumped in the ocean. Multiple people claimed that whenever this guy dove and he came up, his face looked different, like it had changed. And it was like a scaly, brownish green color. And then when he went and he dove back down, they saw his legs and the bottom of his feet, and they looked like flippers. Like he literally looked like some sort of creature from the Black Lagoon type thing, that's my words. I don't know how to describe it, but he looked inhuman. And he jumped into the water while they were on a boat. So it was really weird.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's her story. And she said that for years it gave her nightmares. And like, as a kid, she's a little kid. She didn't see, all she knew was that he jumped off. She saw him jump off, and then her mom grabbed her, and everybody was in shock. And when they tried to get him to like throw a life rafting or whatever, he was not having it, and he dove. Now, after the fact, there were multiple people that were like, "Oh yeah, that he was acting weird. We saw him; he looked weird, and we saw webbed hands and all this other stuff." Her mom and dad were very adamant that they didn't see anything weird about that guy. Like, he was in front of them at one point. They didn't notice anything bizarre about him. Of course, people were saying he smelled fishy, like he was.
Well, after the fact,
Yeah, after the fact, Oh, well, yeah, I noticed the guy was acting weird.
They all gotta
Before
fit
that,
in.
nobody said anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if it's to be believed that this guy did what some of the witnesses claimed that he did, which was morph into some sort of creature, what was his purpose of getting on the boat and going out there? Why not just walk into the ocean and swim out?
It could be territorial thing.
Yeah, and I know why I think, but I wanted to throw this out there. And I know it's going to sound crazy, but it already does. Sharks tend to be within the first 500 to 1,000 yards of shore. That's where they feed. So maybe he wanted to get out past that, go past the brakes, whatever, and then jump into the 2 or 3 miles out in the middle of nowhere. I don't know. Maybe that, I mean, I'm just saying it's a theory. I don't know. It's as good as any other theories. But here's another thing. Somebody told me this happened off the coast of Galveston years ago. They said it was back in like 1977, and that somebody had messaged me, and they said that years ago in 1977 they were about 12 years old, and they were with their dad. This is a young girl, and she said they were out on a boat looking at dolphins. And she said that when we were out there, she's like, everybody started yelling and went to one side of the boat, and they looked. And they see this creature diving, coming back up.
Like a dolphin?
No, it didn't look like a dolphin at all.
No, I just mean like, was it doing the motion?
It wasn't doing that. It was like it came up and it was there, and then it went back down. And they said, "Oh, it's a person." They're like, "No, what is that?" And she herself actually saw this. And I looked this up after this other story was given to me. And she's like, I go to the side of the boat and I look over, and I'll be damned, there was this guy that was kind of like swimming like a man. She's like, but he looked like he was scaly, like a reptile or something. And he was green. And she's like, I saw it with my own eyes. I believe her name is Sandra. She didn't have a problem me saying her name, but she said that it was just like swimming on the top of the water, and then eventually just dove and it was gone. And she said there were a few people that had cameras and they were snapping photos of it. Of course, it's 1977. And there again, it may have just been one of those stories that ended up on a tabloid, somewhere. I have no idea.
And it was keeping up with the boat?
No. The boat was just kind of floating. They were out there to see like dolphins or something like that. And the guy there was just a creature swimming out there that looked like a man. He was just out there. Yeah. He didn't jump off the boat like the one off the coast of Korea. No, he was just there. So I don't know. What is that? Rebecca Paul says out of that Guillermo del Toro movie. What movie?
Oh, Shape of Water,
I think.
Yeah.
What is that? What is that one?
It's like a fish dude and a lady fall in love.
Fish dude.
Yeah, it's like some weird. I don't know. Like, yeah, she falls in love with a merman or something. I don't know. I never watched it just because of the plot.
Okay, he said fish dude. What's so it's like a merman or
it's a fish dude. I mean,
it's some kind of like male fish creature, and she falls in love with it.
It doesn't look human at all. Like it looks like that blue thing from Hellboy.
It's just like Twilight, just the veiled bestiality.
Corley Canner says it won a bunch of awards. I guess I didn't see it. I don't watch a lot of television.
He was a man halibut.
Movies. I try to every time me and my wife try to sit down and watch. We've been trying to choke down Black Spot, which is like, I mean, we're almost done with it. And I'm just like, it's been like 3 weeks of trying to finish it. I don't know how we're can't do any of that. I mean, it's just not that good, to be honest with you. But it sucks too, because with limited amount of time, I don't have a lot of time on my hands to just watch TV and movies, so I got to pick my spots.
It sucks when you choose a bad one.
We watched Young Frankenstein the other day, remember?
Awesome movie.
That was your first time seeing it, right?
Yeah, I'd never seen it before. It was like one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
It's hilarious. This fish foot.
Fish foot.
Yeah, The Boys is pretty good, but it's also just so raunchy, dude. Like
it's a bit over the top.
It's so over the top, dude. I mean, they just
it's like I don't like when like writers try to make something that's like for adults or for mature audiences, but really what that means is they just say extra cuss words and make jokes about genitals. That's it. Like there's nothing deeper than that. Just like what's that stupid show that has every character except Batman on like the CW, and like remember the trailer?
Oh, the Flash.
The trailer for it was like one of the superheroes. He did that stupid thing where like they fall on one knee and they just raise up their head real slow, and he's like, "What about Batman?" F Batman. Shut
Oh,
up, dude.
yeah, that's Teen Titans.
Fucking
It's literally a
stupid.
Got a message from a listener. It says, I couldn't post a message. It said only for subscribers over an hour or longer.
yeah. We have it so that you would have to be subscribed so that you can comment. So you can't just have random trolls come in and comment whatever they want.
Yeah. That way, if someone wants to come in and troll us, then they have to at least subscribe and sit there for an hour, and then like, oh, okay, that this person subscribed to us and gave us an hour of their time just so they can make some comment.
Yeah, exactly. So I just realized the story, we were going to do a paranormal potluck, but I think we probably need to do the lamp story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give you guys a preview of this. And me and Anthony went over this last night. Do you remember what we talked about?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody had sent me a story from the Middle East, and it was I don't want to call it a lamp because it didn't give off light, but what would you call it? A gravy boat? Like, I don't know what you would call it. I mean, I know what it looks like, but I can't, it just looks like an innocuous, weird looking thing, that you would put like incense or something in. It's like, it kind of looks like one of those genie lamps.
Mm.
And it's funny because like several weeks ago, I was just like doing what I do, driving, and I thought, I wonder if that really exists. You know how they say that there's like, the word genie is from jinn. And if there are actual creatures that could be, we know because of the Dybbuk, the Jewish tradition, they have these Dybbuk that they put in boxes. And I've heard of them actually putting them inside of like crystals and things like that. But could you rub a lamp and make something come out? Now, I don't know. But this particular person, who's a cousin of a friend of mine, one of my Lebanese friends, I used to work with a lot of Lebanese people, and that's why I got a lot of friends. But they gave me a story. He says, I got a you know how he is. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
He likes to joke around. But he says, I got a cousin who's crazy and thinks like you. Because he's like, but really, truly, this person believes, but it kind of scares him. And he's a friend of mine. I used to work with him years ago at the club. And so he kind of made a joke about it. He goes, hey, talk to my cousin. His cousin is Alam. He says that he can, and it's his wife's cousin, actually. But in my book, it was that guy's cousin, that actually told a couple of stories that were from that, about the werewolf creature, the Ayub. So he gives me a story, and I'm not going to get into the whole, but it's really creepy because they went to Turkey with his wife's family. This is my friend's cousin. He got in touch with this guy. And he bought something from a bazaar, like a market. And when he did, and he brought it back to the hotel, one of the bellhops at the hotel told him, he says, you shouldn't have that. You shouldn't have bought that. That is not a good thing. And wackiness ensues. And it was all based on, I don't know, a genie in a lamp? I mean, for lack of a better term. And it gets weird. It gets really weird. It gets weird. It gets creepy. Okay. And I had to psych myself up because when I started reading it and I was now get this, and y'all two don't know this yet. I don't think I told you. After I read this story, we have a paper shredder that I want to destroy. I want to beat it with a bat and just break it into little pieces like on Office Space where they're just jumping up and down on it. Yeah. I hate this machine. Okay. And it is possessed, okay? So it starts, you know how it was doing that, for all day, and it just kept doing it? Mm-hmm. It started when I was in there reading that story. And then I thought, what suspicious timing, this piece of crap decides to go off. I don't think it's connected, but I mean, well, it is weird, but it gave me pause for thought. And I went in there and I kicked it. And and then it goes like like it growls. It growled at me. I'm like, hey, behave, okay? Hey,
That's enough.
paper shredder, behave.
Be quiet now.
You're a robot. You shut up.
You're a offend of the brain. Offend, okay? No more. No more.
You make too much noise.
We pay too much money for you. Now I break. The thing is, I don't know if that's real. No, Matt, that's not, the gears aren't stripped. That thing is, we just got
Yeah, I
it.
was gonna say it's new.
We just got it. It didn't even last 2 days, and it was already going like, "Wah." You ever seen Ice Pirates with the one robot? He's not doing anything. He's just going up and down with his. I don't know if you've ever seen Ice Pirates. If you haven't seen it, you don't know what I'm talking about. Go watch it. It's funny. The guy takes the robot over to the ledge. He goes, "Hey, man, come here. Look down there." Knocks him over. That's what I want to do to this thing. It's that. Ice Pirates was a cult classic from the 80s. Just check it out. It's a really good show. I'll give you this story here. I don't even know how to classify it. It's like, it's a ghost story, and I don't want to tell too much about this person's deal because I do want to get them. I think this person's going to come on the show, or at least we're going to record. We have a big, long list of people who we're trying to get ready to record with, and if we weren't gearing up for the conference and the books weren't being a pain in the butt, because, and honestly, folks, I want to make sure that the books are correct. That's the main thing. I just want them to be, they're not going to be perfect. I get that. And the first one, I don't think I did as good, but I did better in the second one. And it's probably going to get better and better. Hopefully I'll get better at this, right? But I wanted it to be a certain way for you, the readers. So that's why, and so Tony and me and Anthony and Nelly, all of us have been working really hard to make sure that we've all read them, right?
I've read it twice.
And we've all read them twice,
Yeah.
and it's because we want it to be correct. It's like Scorpion's like, well, finish. I'm like, read it again. That's the third time. Fourth time's a charm, or some crap. Scorp, read it.
You need to learn how to read anyway.
Jeez, reading is fundamental. And if you don't, I will beat you with this back scratcher that I had in my hand.
Books don't hurt. Well, you've never been hit in the head with one.
Mickey G says, I'm showing me how. You bet. I'm not a young buck. I'm 48 years old. Oh, man. An old boomer movie for people who grew up in the 80s. David, I'm not a boomer, man. I'm a Gen Xer. But what's crazy is that, I'm sitting here trying to do all this. I'm trying to read these, whatever. And now I'm trying to do the show, and we don't have a lot of time to do all this stuff, but we have a huge list of people who we're trying to get them recorded with, so we can start dropping Tuesdays and Thursdays. I think, Anthony, you made the call that we are going to start doing Thursdays after the conference?
Yeah.
Okay. So he made the call that we're going, and that's going to consist of interviews, right?
Yeah, because the interviews, that typically they'll go on for like 2 or 3 hours, so we have to break them up into like 2 or 3 parts. But we don't want y'all to get like, let's say we have an interview that's like 3 hours long. Well, that means that you get 3 weeks of the same guest, and for almost a month. And we want to be able to keep y'all stimulated with different stuff, not just like the same.
Yeah, we don't want to just give you the choice of like interviews or the regular podcast.
Yeah.
We'd rather just give you both.
So we're going to do the story submissions on Tuesday,
Yeah.
right? And then we're going to do,
Yeah, like whatever interviews we
Interviews
have,
on
we'll
Thursday.
submit those on Thursdays.
yeah.
And I mean,
it's like how we're doing the live.
yeah, and I mean, not to take away from our guests, they're everything they bring to the table is just fascinating. But for y'all, we want y'all to be able to have as much as you can. So we want to up our game a little bit.
Yeah. Folks, I have actually had a couple people saying that I'm producing too much content because the lives do go for 3 hours. And I've had a few people say that before, and I've had a few people more say it. They say that I'm doing, these lives are too long, and they're saying that there's too much content with the Tuesday shows. So if you guys, honestly, this is kind of the barometer for me, is the live stream. I mean, if you guys, you're my base, If you think it's too much, then maybe we can not do the Thursdays and we'll just throw the interviews on the Tuesdays. But let me know what you think in the comments, because I'm down to do whatever the listeners want. Somebody says, I like the long lives. Yeah, a lot of people and there's a bunch of people telling me that I need to shorten my live stream, and telling us, all of us, sending us messages saying that we need to shorten our, what did they say? They said we should do like a 28, or not 20, a 20 to 30.
Oh, they wanted like just a quick story, basically.
Yeah, like
just
a 20 to
30 minute story.
One story at a time.
Yeah.
And do that on Tuesday. And I'm like, I don't know, man.
I mean,
yeah, I see Johnny Hawkins says I would say shorter lives. So he says it.
I mean, the thing is, if we did that, we would be appealing to people who typically don't even listen to us anyway. Because, like, I mean, our audience is like overwhelmingly people who have a longer attention span.
Yeah.
You know, so I think we would rather give y'all what y'all want than give people who don't listen to us anyway what they want. It wouldn't really make sense to appeal to their attention spans and their sensibilities when y'all are right here with us. You know, like we want to make stuff for y'all, not these people who are watching Mr. Beast or whatever crap, you know, whatever.
I am going to say this, and I'm not trying to put you people on the spot that said that about to all of us. We've all gotten the message at least once or twice. I'm going to say this. It typically is younger people, right?
Yeah. Lower attention span.
I didn't say it. They did. The younger people said it. But, yeah, that's what we kind of figured, because I think almost all of them, except for like maybe one or two, were young people. I mean, you know, but what do you do? You want to appeal to the younger crowd. I mean, certain people aren't going to be your base no matter what you do. So pandering to them is really not going to do anything for you. You know, I think there's certain politicians that have figured that out, that it doesn't matter what they do or say, that they're going to hate them because they're Republican or they're Democrat or they're whatever, because they're not your team. So they're not. They could literally solve world hunger, cure cancer, and give everybody $1 million and build flying machines and houses, and they'd be like, I don't like them. I don't like them. They're not my political party. I don't like that guy. He did all that stuff. You know why? Just so you could vote for him. That's why he did it. And you're like, well, thank goodness he did, because now I will vote for that person because they cured cancer, world hunger, and gave everybody money and built flying houses.
Yeah, but he doesn't like the color blue.
He's partial to red. And you know what that is? The devil. Do you believe in the devil? No, I don't. But if I did, it would. You know, and they just go on, and it doesn't make a lick of sense half the time what the hell they're talking about. I literally watched a political argument the other day on Facebook, and it just boiled down to poo-poo caca head, basically. And I was just sitting there, and it was like just rah, 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 back and forth. The slinging of the mud was just amazing, and I was over there just eating popcorn, watching. I was like, wow.
I mean,
people try to tag me, and I was like, I don't want to be involved in this crap. Don't bring me into this, dude.
I mean, at a certain point, I think like the way they debate in some of those like it's like Asian or Southeast Asian or Polynesian countries where you see those videos of them just
bringing out machetes.
Yeah, or like it just ensues into an all-out brawl. Like you can look at that and think, oh, that's barbaric, and yeah, it is, but it's.
They get things done.
Well, but like it's actually more honest than what we have here. Like two people pretending to be upstanding, you know, upright, whatever. Yet you know they're putting on a mask. At least if they were to break down into a fist fight, that's very open, honest conflict.
Well, it also shows they care. Like, you know, it shows like, dang, like he's willing to fight for his whatever he's pushing. Whereas like half the time I feel like people push stuff and they don't even really care about it either way.
Valerie, guys, the younger crowd don't have that super chat money, so sit down and shut up. That's it. It's true. That is my base there. Orlando Herrera says the more of PRT, the better. I'm wherever you guys come on. I'm gonna tell you what happened to me real quick before I get into. I'll get another story here, but tell me in the chats what you want to hear. I got this person who I'm friends with, but he's always posting political stuff. I mean, it's all the time, and there's a few of them that do it. Some of them on the left, some of them on the right. Well, this guy hates a particular former president. He's always talking about him. And I'm friends with this guy. I don't have a problem with him personally. But I just finally was like, dude, are you saying that the other presidents that we've had for the last several presidents, like, they're good? Or that the one that's in there now is better than this other guy? Are you kidding me? Like, and he was really upset that I said something. And then somebody said, you're an idiot. And I'm just like, all I'm trying to say is that they're all not good. You know, it's like there's not good and then more not good, but they're still not good. You know, and I get you want to see certain people get in trouble and whatever. Me personally, if you ask me my true honest belief, I think they should all be in trouble. I think they've all done things. How is it that every president we've had gets into office and then leaves rich? How does that work? Mm-hmm. No politician should be in there for life either. There's these lifelong politicians. And once a person's president, they're done. That's it. They go away. They don't go become a politician. They don't do that. They have their time, and that's it. But yet you can go in as a senator or congressman, whatever, representative, and just be there forever. How does that work? I mean, that's not correct. I don't give a crap. And I just think I'm sitting there going like, okay, you hate this guy. You hate plan A, but not plan B.
It's like trying to find the best turd in the manure field.
Oh, I'm a Cowboys fan, so I don't like the Niners. That's a sports team, you know. It's like they're rooting for a sports team or something, dude. I mean, you know, I hate that guy because he's not my political party. And you got to accept everything that's a part of that political party. No, because I don't accept everything that the Republicans or Democrats do. There's stuff that I don't like from either one. And we should use common sense and be like, hey, maybe what this party's doing over here is not correct, and maybe that is a good idea from that. But they don't want to do that. They vote straight across. No. I'm going to be this because that's what I was told to be, and I was raised that way, so I'm going to be that. It doesn't make a lick of sense. That's just, you know, and so I guess I made him mad. I wasn't trying to, but I'm just like, how do you see this guy as bad but not these other guys? And then somebody said, don't make this about the, you know, one particular party. I'm like, I didn't. Read my comment. I made it about both parties and particular presidents from both parties, and that wasn't good enough. They had to key in on what I said about their particular party people, whatever. Neither one of them are worth a crap. I don't see how you can't see that. But that's, you know, if that's what you choose, then so be it. We're not here to talk politics. We're here to talk about the stories. Did you guys make up your mind? Wolf is a okay.
Maynard says more history lessons, please.
More history lessons. We could do that. That would. You'd sit here all day doing that. I like everything you guys talk about: U.S., Texas, and First Nations history, life in Australia, Mexican cuisine, all of it, and of course cryptids. I had somebody who says, I listened to your, she told me the other day, and I'm not trying to bag on her, but she said something, I think it was kind of rude, but she said, I like listening to your hour-long podcast. I don't have time for all the other crap that you talk about on your live stream. That sounds terrible and rude the way she said it. But that's not what she actually typed. That's how I read it. I read into it, and I said, that's what she's saying. What she actually said was, oh, I listen to all your podcasts, but I don't really have time for the live streams. So I'm like, oh, that's awesome. So when you're asking me questions on the podcast, you may not know what's going on because you weren't listening to the live streams. Right? Because on this podcast episode coming up on Tuesday, we actually make reference to an alien abduction case that we only talked about on the live stream. So good luck, everybody else. You're going to be like, when was that? I don't remember that. And they're not going to know what the heck's, because we talked about it on the live. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. Here's a story. Anyway, I got one. I'm gonna just nobody's telling me what they want to hear, but I'm just gonna tell you right now. I'll tell you one. And this involves some kids that were actually, well, they're not kids now, but when they were children, they were playing with fireworks down in Mexico, right across the border, not far, just south of Nuevo Laredo. And they were blowing up ants. When you're young and you're poor, anything can be
Your brain
entertainment. Yeah.
makes everything entertainment.
So they were out there and they had fireworks because in Mexico, you can buy fireworks all year round. You pop them all year round. Doesn't have to be just when it's bitterly cold and you can't feel your hands or the fuses, or when you go outside to pop a firework and your face melts off your head, because those are the only 2 times a year that apparently Americans are allowed to pop fireworks.
Mm-hmm.
Either when it's, blistering heat or biting cold. There's no in between. Fireworks, it's either,
It's so hot you can hold the fuse up and
6th
it light
level of
itself.
hell or Antarctica.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever. So what's crazy is that they were out there and they were blowing up fireworks, and what they did was uncover something living in the ground. Now, I thought this story was really creepy, and I wanted to save it for a paranormal potluck, but I'm going to tell you folks because you look like nice people, I guess. What they uncovered was what looked like a mole. I don't mean a mole on your arm, your head, or whatever. I mean like a mole, like a creature. They blew up something and it disturbed its home and it came out. The only problem with this mole was that it was the size of a dog. So it came up out of the ground looking like some sort of weird, twisted creature from some nightmare. And this guy told me, he says, his name was Hector. And Hector says, dude, this thing came up out of the ground and it looked demonic. And it didn't, because it had a face like a mole, but it had a humongous mouth of teeth. And it had weird looking, the legs had weird looking hands. And it was like, the way he described it, it was long. It was a really long body. And the back legs were way, way longer than the front legs. And in fact, the back legs allowed this thing to stand up. He said, dude, I'll never forget it. I was 14 years old. And I was like, you're not a kid. You're 14. What are you doing blowing up ants with your... He said, no, I was out there with my little cousins, my siblings. He's like, mi hermanos, we're out there and we blow up some ants. We're out there messing around, fireworks. 14 years old. He was the oldest. We're 6 kids out there messing around. He said, this thing comes crawling up out. We see the head. Then we see the teeth. He said, and then we see the little hands, the little arms. Pushes itself, comes up out of the dirt. He said, dude, it was almost dark. Late summer, hot as all hell. And he said, this thing comes up out of there, and when it gets up to it shakes itself, looks over at him, and they couldn't tell as it was looking, as his eyes were completely white. So they started sniffing the air, and they think that it was blind. And then it stands up on its hind legs. And he's like, I hear this pow, pow, like 2 little quick pops. This thing was on its hind legs, and it had like its arm. It was like it couldn't extend the arms, the legs. And it began to run at them. His little cousin, Armando, thought quickly and threw an M80 and hit it right in the face. Timed it great, threw it. And they all took off running to the house. That night, because his parents were in town at some sort of quinceañera for their family, friends of the family, whatever. He was in charge of the kids. Him and his 12-year-old sister were often left in charge of the smaller children because both of his parents had to work all the time. But this was a Friday night, and they were out there partying and where his parents were. And they said, hey, take care of the kids, take care of your cousins, whatever. So he did what any irresponsible babysitter would do and took them to blow up ants. And he said, dude, after he did this, this creature comes up out of the ground. And he said, dude, it was all night long. And he said, dude, we didn't have a telephone. Parents had cell phones. We didn't. He's like, I had a crappy landline that rarely worked because it was turned off half the time. And his dad, let's be honest, his dad drank a lot. Wasn't one of those guys that thought things through too well. So he said, dude, here I am taking care of my cousins. There was no gun there for him to shoot this thing with. And it began to terrorize them. It started tearing at the screen of one of the windows of one of his smaller siblings' bedroom, or his two smaller siblings. Thank you for that donation. Autumn Lehman, thank you so much for that donation. He says, dude, there's nothing I can do. And I said, so how did it end? And so eventually my Theo, his uncle, comes home. And he's like, with his, aunt, they got there first. His dad was one of those people that always partied till the wee hours of the morning. And this creature was in the back at that point. They had a dog in the backyard that this thing went after and unalived pretty quickly. He said it was horrible. They went out there at one point trying to, yes, Adam, Baracho. It was Baracho Teresos. But in the backyard, and he goes, we go out there, we grab a rake, shovel, we all started hitting it, trying to get it off of the dog. It didn't make it. Then it turned and attacked us, grabbed a hold of one of the shovels and started tearing it, throwing it, whatever. They all ran back inside. It broke the back door, the glass to the back door, and was almost inside the house when his aunt and uncle showed up. Then it bailed. It took off. They didn't see it. And when his dad and mother came home, they were in shock at the state of affairs in the house, and the damage that was done to the outside of the house. Like, what the hell happened? What's going on? He says, look, we were out there, we were blowing up ants with fireworks. Something came up out of the ground. And they're like, well, what was it? And he described it, thinking for sure he was going to get a beating because they weren't going to believe it. They thought that, the unruly kids you couldn't control destroyed the house. And he's like, no, that's not what happened. What happened was this mole creature that would get down on all fours but then pop back up on two legs, whatever, came back a couple days later. His abuelito, his grandfather, his dad's dad, came over. He says, dude, this was his house at one time. Shade Viking.
Yeah, Voldemort.
Voldemort. That's very clever, Shade Viking. So he comes over and he says, look, I lived here in this house on this land since I was a kid. This is something that we've seen before. And he said that these things exist. Now, remind you that his dad is an alcoholic. By his words, his dad died shortly after his dad died, cirrhosis. Drank until he died. Crazy thing, whenever his dad was confronted by this by his dad, which would have been this guy Hector's Abuelito, his grandfather, he's like, "You don't remember these things, mijo, when you were a kid?" He's like, "There was one in the front yard, and you threw a rock at it, and it tried to break in through the window." He said it right in front of him, and he's like trying to tell him to be quiet, right? Trying to tell his dad stop, whatever. He's like, I knew at that point that my dad knew exactly what this was. He had dealt with these before, and he was basically just pretending like it didn't exist. Like it was something that his dad had pushed out of his mind because it scared him. And so I don't know what these things were. His grandfather and his grandfather's younger brother, his great uncle, they hung out, had a couple shots of tequila, and just sat in the front yard. And then they hear bang, bang. They go out there and they see this thing laying in the back of the truck. He goes up. I look at it. I observe it. It is the creature that was trying to get in the house. It was unalived. They get in the truck with his uncle, his great uncle, and his grandfather, and they drive off to go dump it wherever. Interesting thing, later, his grandfather, they were out fishing. He said this was a few months after his dad died. And his grandfather, he said, "Do you want to know what those things are?" Because I know you want to ask me. And he's like, "Yeah, I do. I don't like talking about it, but yeah, I do want to know." And he says, "You know what they are?" He's like, they come from deep, deep, deep underground. And he said that one time when he was a kid, he was visiting some family that lived in the interior of Mexico. And this is what his grandfather said. He said, "We went into an open mine shaft, me and my brothers. I was the youngest, and he's at that time. And I was 6. And I got left behind because we heard some screeching noises, whatever." He said, and I looked, and there was like a natural walkway, like a natural path. It was kind of, he said, and I looked over the side of it, and he said that this creature was looking up at him, and it was like smacking its teeth. And he looked down, and there was this big rock, almost like it had been placed there. And this is weird. This is something you're not even going to, you're not going to believe what he said. He said there was like something like a big boulder had been placed there that kept these things from getting up to where he was at. And then he hears a tsh, psst noise. It sounded almost like air coming out of a tire. He says, and I see this creature come walking out of the darkness. And he's like, and I'm the youngest. He's like, and I'm slower than the other kids. They had all ran. He's like, and I see what must have been a man about 15 feet tall. He looked like a giant, covered in hair, not fur. Didn't look like an ape, like just a very hairy guy with a beard, long hair. And he went up and he grabbed that creature and picked it up and started to walk off. He said, this guy was so large. He said it was like when he walked, he could feel the earth, like kind of like the ground, like he could feel it. He said, I turned around and looked at him, and then it told him, afuera, outside, like go, psst, like that. Man, a few words. He says, dude, I booked. I got the heck out of there. He says, it's like, Grandpa, you saw a giant? He said, yes. He's like, I don't know if they breed these things. I don't know what these things have to do with them, but it just picked it up by its neck and carried it away. He's like, imagine this thing that picked it up was like a giant. This little creature caused all that damage to the house. He's like, the handlers could do a lot more damage than the little creatures. He's like, I don't know if they're just, some of them are wild, they go rogue, or they breed them. I don't know what they do with them. He goes, but they come from within the earth. And he goes, and I saw one that looked very similar to that one. And then there was one that tried to get into the house years ago, and we shot at it, got rid of it. They had a shotgun and was able to fend it off, whatever. But I can't tell you that's the same one, and I can't tell you that's the last one. He's like, I feel like after whatever it was, me seeing it caused these things to come around my property. Like, I don't know. Where he had the encounter with this creature and this giant thing was, if you do kilometers to miles, okay, which is like 0.6, whatever, 140 miles away. So I thought it was kind of weird, you know, that we were talking about them, the dogmen, finding you from a long ways away, and Bigfoot too. People talk about Bigfoot. Bigfoot can track you. There was a woman in British Columbia that got followed all the way to Tacoma by a Bigfoot. Swears with the same thing, but I mean, how do they travel? She saw orbs and other weird anomalies around her house. And then Bigfoot shows up, whatever. So he told me that he had heard me talk about the inner earth. He says, I have a story to tell you from my grandfather. And I read that, and I thought, that is crazy.
Bizarre, to say the least.
Yeah. Now, I tried to figure out if we had heard any stories of any creatures that looked even remotely like that, and I couldn't find anything that looked mole-like.
No. I mean, the closest thing I could think of is maybe like a rake, but not.
No, this
too
thing had like
different.
a light fur on it.
Yeah, it's still too different. But like that's a rake to me seems like a creature that's destined for underground.
Yeah,
Except-
it belongs to the underground, yeah.
That
For
reminds me
the
of the
eyesight.
Skaven from Warhammer.
It does a little bit,
You know, I mean, they live underground too.
but they do have sight.
Is that a video game, or is that a
Remember the rat
role
people
playing
I was painting?
Yeah, it's like a RPG
Yeah.
with
The figures.
With the
They're
minis.
called
that's
Skaven.
Blood Bowl?
I mean, like it was
The whole
the-
universe is called Warhammer.
The Blood Bowl is based in the Warhammer universe.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Like I think Warhammer
Crap,
came.
I didn't know that.
Warhammer came out like as a tabletop game. I think like back in the 80s or something.
Yeah,
so
I knew,
it's been
it
around
was
for
like a
long time.
tabletop game, but is there like a video game now, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like
yeah.
there's a bunch of different ones that have been made, like different kinds of games based on
It's
that.
I had time to do
World.
stuff like that.
It's a really big universe. So.
Yeah. Tony knows it a lot more than I do because he likes
Loki
it a
just
lot.
said something. He said they probably can only come out at night. I don't know. See, this is the kind of video games I play. Mike Tyson's Punch Out.
hmm
You know, I don't know. Yeah, rodents of unusual size. I got a story about rats the size of dogs. I got a couple, but it was just a weird thing. I don't know what to make of it. Yeah, exactly. Noble bald bull. That's who this is right here. That's Little Mac right there. See, Caleb says I was a level 420 on Warhammer. I don't know. Is that good?
I don't even know what the hell he's talking
What
about.
is it?
I'm sure
420?
he's making a
I
joke.
think he's making it. I have no
Teenage
idea. Well, we didn't
Mutant
have any
Joke
giant
down.
snake stories. Yeah, actually, I do. We were thinking about doing this episode about it because we got some from the Amazon, and then we had one that we were told there was somebody who had gone to the Congo looking for Makili Mbembe, and they found a giant snake about 35 feet long.
Like a Tinaboa or
Titanic, but I don't know about that. But how big was that? Like 100 feet?
Hmm.
That's not, no. Yeah. So anyways, that's the story that, you know, I don't know. Tell me what your thoughts are on that. I don't know what to make of it other than it was interesting. And I do believe that we have a lot to learn about the nature of our reality and the existence of what may or may not be down below our feet. We get so many weird stories, and I think that people know that they can come to us and tell us things. That one of the problems too that I'm coming across is people are like this one girl. She told us a little bit of her story in a group that I'm in. Haunting. Well, I can't say the name of it. I shouldn't probably say the name of it, but it's a group. It's predominantly a ghost group, but she said something about something being. And some of the ghost people are really like, oh, well, this isn't about demons. They're not demons, because they don't like that term or whatever. Some of them are real snooty about it. And that sounds demonic or something. Like, okay, so you're not supposed to talk about it. It's still a spirit, but it's not a ghost. But it was in a ghost group, and she was talking about a creature that obviously was metaphysical. And they attacked her. I mean, it was like 20 people on there just dogpiling on this kid, you know, and well, it's not a kid. She's 30, but that's young to me. And so I messaged her and I said, hey, if you want to tell that story, I will so absolutely tell a story. Just tell it, you know, because, you know, and she's like, do you believe me? And I was like, well, honestly, I didn't even get to read it all because I just saw a bunch of snarky comments, you know. And I said, but if you have a story to tell, so she sends me the story, and I haven't, like I said, I haven't had I just read, you know, when I get a story, I read over real quick, and then I go, oh, I got to come back to that and get to the meat and potatoes of it. But from what I read, it was pretty chilling, and it happened to her in a cave, and she saw something come out of the wall of a cave, which I believe we've talked about before. And she said that it looked like, it kind of looked like a rake type creature, but she said it looked demonic. And the way she said that it was folded over and the way it stood up kind of reminded me of these mole creatures, you know, and the teeth and everything, except the face would have been different. But a weird thing, I got a story from somebody who was in a cave in Belize. What's weird about Rodney, his name is Rodney. What's weird about Rodney's story is that he says that one of these things, this is, to me, 100% like alien to me. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like my beliefs, everybody's beliefs should kind of be evolving and growing as you gain more knowledge, you know. So I can't say mine are set in stone. But I've always believed that there were civilizations that came here and ended up in the inner Earth. Like I'd said on Friday about Mars, about them being in Mars. And then, of course, me and Kirk Reed, we talked about the creatures in Australia in the middle of the continent, you know. Same thing with Greenland. We're talking about Thule. Here's the thing. He saw something that looked like, and I read this I read another one in Fate. Don't quote me, folks. I think it was Fate magazine, where somebody had come across something kind of like, and if you follow the show and the live streams, you'll know what I'm talking about. Like Edidorpa. You know how we were talking about Edidorpa? Yeah. Okay, and I'm not going to get into a big old thing of what that is. If you're following, you follow. And this thing, whatever it was kind of like that. It had a tail and it was white, but what we thought of was the rake's face. It took it off. Like it was like, you know, and then he heard this like popping noise, and like he saw dust or air kind of blow off the side of it. And he saw it turn, and you could see the flesh color all over the face. It was like it didn't have any skin, and its tongue was just like flopping around. And it had these eyes, and when it blinked, it was like, you know, like real pronounced. And then where the nose should have been, there was like this nub right here, and then like two holes. And he just said it was just horrible. It looked like a monster, a demon, whatever. And he was like, dude, please put your mask back on, because what you got going on underneath that mask is something I don't want to see. And this was a guy who had gone spelunking into a cave in Belize. And he was like, dude, and him and two other people saw this. And when they went back and tried to tell, and it was like a guy that would take people like on tours, and going, oh, we're going to go into a cave. And this guy was like, no, don't talk about that. Like, he said, they won't hurt you. And he's like, I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to tell everybody what I saw. And he's like, no, you can't do that. To the point where the guy was kind of veiled, threatening him. Because I guess he doesn't want his business being hurt. People knowing what the hell's down there. But I'm going like, dude, there's, toward the one side of that structure, there's some sort of alien species down there doing what they do that looks like, he said that thing, it wasn't overly large. It's about 6 foot, size of a man. Said it looked like it probably weighed about 180 pounds by our, whatever, the imperial system, not the metric system, And he said, dude, it was crazy. And then this guy was like telling him, don't be telling people. And it was hurt his business. Man, F your business, dude, okay? Like, somebody's going to go down there, and he goes, the thing looks like it'd eat somebody if it wanted to.
It probably does.
Man, I wasn't worried about him. It was doing whatever it was doing. Another thing it was doing, it had this, like, thick, what he thought was a piece of crystal or something, and it was pushing it with its fingers. Like some sort of technology that we've never seen, and it was glowing orange and red and whatever, and he was just like, what the heck is this? But anyway, I talked to him, and he was just, that's his story. Somebody says they eat people. Yeah, very possible.
Well, that's probably why he said, like, oh, they don't attack anybody. He's more likely saying, like, oh, all the people they attack, they don't even come back, so it's not...
It's nobody to complain about. Until somebody says the last thing that, weird, you know how they do the zip lining?
Mm-hmm.
That was somebody that went zip lining over here in Central Texas, like, and there again, it's a newer story I got, and people that have sent me stories are probably going like, you're listening to those stories, what about mine? I'm trying to get to them, folks. I'm trying to get to them, but I just keep getting stories all the time, and it's good. Keep sending them. I'm glad that we got a plethora of stories. But this person sent me a story, and she was talking about they went ziplining, and when she looked down, she saw what looked like a white creature with a tail, like zipping through the woods. And
following
like,
her, or
heck, no, it wasn't. No, she didn't say it was following her, but she said she was ziplining over here in the hill country. She didn't specifically say where. She's like, I'll give you the story about what I saw when I was ziplining. So I messaged back, and she just said, I saw something running below me. I'll tell you about it. And I haven't had a chance to get back with her because we've been doing so much stuff.
I heard a crazy story, or I saw a crazy video of a 4-year-old falling down off one of those zip lines.
Oh man!
Thankfully, he fell like 40 feet into water and was fine. But I don't look at them the same way now.
No. Yeah, Loki zipline Lake Travis. Loki used to work with a hot air balloon company. Did you know that?
I did not.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple close calls there. Won't get me on a zip line. Too afraid of heights. Exactly. I don't like heights. Penny Van has it. Maybe the crystal was a cloaking device and it was malfunctions. It was trying to cloak, pushing buttons.
Maybe instead of cloaking, maybe it's like some kind of thing that made them ethereal so that they could go through walls or go through the cave.
Well, like the girl that was being attacked in that group, she was just trying to talk about what she saw in a cave, and they were just like, "Oh, this is bullcrap." One person was like, "Demons don't exist." Oh, this group is for ghosts and whatever. I'm like,
what is a ghost?
What is a ghost?
What? They're acting like it's some kind of clear-cut definition. It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's just like, oh, there's demons, oh, and there's ghosts, and it's very clear. No, it's not.
Yeah, because one person's demon is another person's ghost.
Yeah. I mean, if you just piss off a ghost enough, doesn't it just start acting like a demon?
Doesn't it just that's pretty much what it is, right? I mean, another thing, too, I've had a ghost investigator. He told me recently, we were going back and forth and we were talking, and he said, that we're talking about doing a collaboration, but he pointed out that, ghosts, it's all relative to the person.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody dies, in his opinion, I'm not saying this is mine, but his opinion is if somebody's evil, then they're evil when they die. Simple as that. It was a woman moved into a house where a guy who was very evil died. And she saw him pretty regularly, and he was attacking her and her kids. It was like in Modesto, California or something like that. But I mean, like, the point being, it's not like, oh, they died, so now they're good.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's people like, oh, you go straight to heaven or hell when you die. And that's just as simple as that. No, dude, there's no clear-cut way to say who's right or wrong, and everybody thinks they're right. and their preacher tells them that they're right, but that doesn't mean that you are.
That's not even like biblically correct, though, right?
Well, it depends. It depends on which Bible you read.
Yeah.
I mean, there again. I mean, it's all
I
relative.
think like the scripture doesn't really. It's not too specific in terms of like what happens immediately after we die, and that's I think that's the reason it's like it's such a debated topic amongst different Christian sects. So I mean, the fact is we don't know, and that's all we know is that we don't know.
Well, we don't know. Like Socrates says, all I know is that I know nothing.
Machiavelli, too.
So anyway, folks, everybody, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for those that donated, and thank you for everybody who's contributed. If you're a Patreon, just hang in there. We're going to try and get to you next week, but we got, like I said, the conference going on. I was talking to the caterers today, trying to get everything set up. We are going to have different choices for food. We're going to have those who can't handle beef, because like me personally right now, I can't eat red meat. So there's brisket for those who can, and the best sausage ever, Thorndale Meat Market. And then, of course, we're going to have other choices. So we're going to have grilled chicken breast.
And I'm going to get there early and cut the lawn and pair that for the vegetarian option.
Oh, my gosh. Crystal skulls are interesting. Yes, they are.
They're kind of
Thank you for tuning in.
I was going to... Oh, well, one thing I do want to
weird.
mention is thank you, Barry, for gifting all those subs to everybody. We appreciate you just
He
spending
gifted,
your
like,
money to
5
hand out.
memberships.
Yeah.
That was nice of him.
That's cool.
I want to make sure I thank him for that.
Thank you, Bear. Appreciate that. Thank you, everybody who tuned in. Thank you to everybody who's been helping and contributing and doing whatever they can. Get your tickets. Come to the conference. Have a great time. We're going to have a great time. There's going to be a bunch of us there. Thank you and good night. Oh, Tuesday, vampires.
Tune in.
Thank you, Titoe, for that donation. Thank you.